Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for August 8th. Three of the four selectmen are here. Ms. Faniff was unable to attend tonight. Our first order of business is a 6:30 p.m. hearing to consider application for license from First Colony Development Company to store underground propane tanks at 84 Main Street, Southborough. Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll read the legal notice. Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing Tuesday, August 8th at 6:30 p.m. in the Call of Hearing Room, Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, to consider an application from First Colony Development Company for a license to store LP gas in 4 underground tanks totaling 3,500 gallons to be located 84 Main Street, Southborough, Mass. All interested parties are encouraged to attend. The application is for 4 underground tanks. There are 3,000-gallon tanks and 1 500-gallon tank. The application has been reviewed and signed off on by the fire chief. This is not something that the board signs this evening. It's something that the board would vote to approve the new license. Notifications then sent to the town clerk's office. They issue the licenses and manage the yearly renewals. So the chief has signed off on this, and as far as we know, there are no questions.
Any questions from any members of the board?
No.
Mr. Shea, none?
I don't.
Nope, none for
I
me.
think everything was in order. I don't have any either. I would move that we vote to approve the license from First Colony Development to store underground propane tanks at 84 Main Street, Southborough. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Excellent. Can we do the 6:45 hearing or no? Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do, Ms. Hale, oh, we're all set.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Hale. So we'll move up on the consent agenda item, appointment of administrative assistant to the building department. Ms. Hale.
Good evening. Thank you for moving this up since you have a little bit of space here tonight. So we're respectfully requesting the board appoint 2 new employees tonight. The first position we'll talk about is the assistant town accountant. Karen Figueroa retired at the end of June after many years working for the town in the treasurer's office and up here in the accounting office. So we've been able to, we had 32 applications. We had an interview panel that consisted of myself, the town accountant, and a member of the personnel board, Dave Flynn. And so during that round of interviews, we met with Heidi Lindsay, who's been working as one of our head librarians for about the past 19 years in the library. And she's decided she's looking for a change, and the panel recommends her unanimously. She's obsessively organized, which is exactly the characteristic you want in the town accountant's office. She actually was a bank teller in her prior experience before she came to work for the library. So that's the first recommendation we're making, asking the board to appoint Heidi Lindsay as the new assistant town accountant.
Any questions from members of the board?
I do not.
I do not.
All I can say is I have heard wonderful things about Heidi, and I'm sure the library will be sad to see her go.
They are, in fact.
Glad to keep her in town, and this is, I think, a wonderful opportunity.
Which we love when we can make that happen,
Yeah.
to retain an excellent employee and put them in a new department where they're looking for a new challenge.
Perfect.
So
Can I
that's
just ask,
excellent.
when
Of
will
course.
her position at the library be posted?
The library director is working on that presently. He's been on vacation the last few days, but he'll be back in the office tomorrow.
Perfect.
And he'll be meeting with the trustees tomorrow night about that.
Great, thank
So
you.
you'll be seeing that shortly from the trustees.
Thank you.
In addition, as you know, during town meeting this April, the town agreed to fund a full-time ZBA position down in the building department. So Karen Finelli, who had been the department assistant in building, decided she would really like to stay with the ZBA, which is fantastic because she knows everything about the ZBA. She's been working with them for several years now. So that created a vacancy, which also was posted just recently. Principal department assistant in the building department. So we are asking that the board, again, we had, I think, 29 applications for that position. We interviewed 4 people. It was myself, the building inspector, and Mr. Purple. We tried to condense that interview process so we can move ahead quickly and get some more help in the building department since it's their busy season. So we are asking that the board appoint Robert Wood, also known as RJ, to the principal department assistant in the building department. who also happens to be a town resident.
There you go.
Yep.
Questions, comments?
No. It's good to see another excellent candidate
Yes,
recommended.
we're very happy to unanimously recommend RJ.
And I would like to add so a wonderful opportunity for Karen Finelli for the full-time position.
Yes.
She's done amazing work. Really, I don't know how she kept up with all of it and all the moving parts at ZBA and doing it in the
Busy
time frame
place.
she was asked to do it. She's an incredible asset to this town, and our community's stronger having her now in the full-time position, and it's great that it made it an opening for another individual. RJ is a classy young man and,
Yes.
and eager and energetic, and I'm confident he'll do great work. I would move that we vote to appoint both individuals as stated by Ms. Hale under consent agenda item number 1. Is there a second?
Second.
1 and 2.
I'm sorry, 1 and 2. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Excellent.
you. I just wanted to inform the board, if you had not already heard, that we're unfortunately losing our Economic Development Coordinator, Pam DiGiovanni, who's been a fantastic candidate
She's here,
to
yes.
start us off in our Economic Development Department. So we're very sad to be saying goodbye to Pam next week. She and her husband and her young children are moving to North Carolina, so we wish her all the best, and we'll be posting her job actually tomorrow.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So,
And
thank you.
I've had the pleasure of working with Pam, and she is the consummate professional. She would sit right here at every meeting, and she was always prepared. And the level of energy that she brought to that position and the level of detail she brought it has been absolutely wonderful for the EDC and for our town. She's going to be missed greatly, and we're fortunate to have her as long as we did.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What can we bring up next? Mr. Malinowski would love to, sir, please. And that was under, perfect. Yeah, okay, sir, an update if you would on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as the board is well aware, we are pushing at about 100 miles an hour on the Public Safety Building Committee. We've had regular meetings throughout the summer, and I just wanted to bring you and the residents of the community up to date on our progress to date. Earlier this week, the owner's project manager contract was signed, the Vertex company out of Weymouth. You reviewed that at your meeting a couple weeks ago. We had a kickoff meeting with them, myself and Mr. Purple, just to kind of figure out what our timeline would be so that we can start to post the appropriate public meetings. At the last Public Safety Building Committee meeting, we were given advice from the Attorney General's office that should we wish to start the process of retaining the current architect that had worked with us both on the feasibility and schematic design process that led up to town meeting, that our board could at least indicate our desire for the owner's project manager to start that process once they were on board. Our committee unanimously approved continuing to explore a contract with Context Architecture, which was formerly known as Donovan Sweeney when we worked with them last time. It's the same personnel, different name, and contract negotiations are currently underway. Should we be successful in bringing a contract back to you, then Context would be the likely designer for the project. Should something fall through during that process, we'd obviously have to go out to a bid process. We estimate that that would delay our project by 2.5 to 3 months. Couple that delay with the fact that we were very happy with the services that we received and the fact that we now have another layer of supervision in terms of the owner's project manager. That was really why the committee voted in the way that they did to move that forward unanimously. So we expect, hopefully by the end of next week, to present you with a contract that has been negotiated between the owner's project manager on behalf of the town and the architectural firm that you can then vote in. So we will be making a request that you hold some sort of administrative meeting in advance of your next scheduled meeting in September so that our progress is not delayed as an overall committee. Once the architect is on board, I think we're going to have a far more concrete plan. We certainly do not have any revised numbers or estimates. That's going to be a mid to late fall activity where we'll have kind of another costing exercise once we know exactly what we're looking at in terms of a building, where it's going, et cetera, obviously working off of the same promises that were made at town meeting. We greatly are looking forward to working in conjunction with the golf course committee that my understanding is you're hopefully forming tonight. We think that there are some immediate needs that we need to coordinate with them on ASAP to make sure that we abide by all the wishes that you indicated when you appointed us as Public Safety Building Committee members. To that extent, we would recommend that you appoint Mr. Rooney from our committee as the ex officio member. Our committee did take a unanimous vote on that, and think he is the ideal candidate to sit in that capacity as ex officio, non-voting, to basically make sure that what was promised to the taxpayers comes to reality, both from a public safety perspective in terms of the functionality of the building, but also maintaining the golf course, as in whatever way we possibly can. So I would ask that you move that forward on your agenda tonight when you get to that. And then looking into the fall, what we're looking at is we'll have a series of public forums for input, not only from abutters, but towns members, folks that maybe didn't have enough time to fully digest floor plans, schematic design, and just provide an open forum. We are reaching out to other town boards currently. We are going to be on the advisory committee agenda next meeting. We are going to be reaching out to planning and conservation and Board of Health on an informal basis to see if they'll entertain any discussions ahead of the formal permitting process. We're trying to be a step ahead, not a step behind. So what we would welcome from any of you, but also members of the community, is if at any point in time you don't feel like we're falling behind and we're not giving the right updates, we would appreciate that sanity reality check. But also to the extent that there's feedback, we think we have some great individuals, not only on our committee, but now representing the town in terms of the Vertex companies and what they're doing in other communities with similar projects. So with that, that's where we stand. We anticipate being here frequently and often with many requests of you. But with that, if there's any questions from the board.
Questions for Mr. Malinowski?
Comment?
Comment, please.
Okay. I would just like to thank you and your committee again. I was able to watch and see some of the interviews that you guys had done. I know we commented on it at our last meeting, but seeing as you're here, I'd like to, again, commend you guys. You did a fabulous job. You asked great questions, tough questions. We certainly put the right team together, so thank you, and if you could share that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'll just tag on to that, just appreciate the aggressive meeting schedule that you people are keeping and keeping us on our toes, therefore as well. So thanks to you and to everybody on the committee for that and the commitment that you're showing.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay. We are basically at,
I don't know if that's the other hearing.
Yeah. So we can do the 6:45 PM hearing application for transfer of license for Rose Garden. Mr. Purple. Hello, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just read the, notice, which I just had in front of me. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the Mass General Laws that Liang Feng Incorporated, DBA Rose Garden, has applied for a transfer of its restaurant all-alcoholic beverage license on the premises located at 1 Southville Road in Southborough, Mass., described as a first-floor, 4,000 square foot, 5-room building with 1 entrance and 3 exits, proposed seating capacity of 88, proposed occupancy of 99, proposed transferee, New Rose Garden Incorporated, DBA Rose Garden, Terry Moe is manager on record. A public hearing will be held in the Thomas W. McAuliffe Hearing Room, 2nd floor of the Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, on Tuesday, August 8th at 6:45 p.m. And with that, I'll turn it over to the attorney to speak to the application.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Coleman on behalf of the applicant. I have with me Terry Moe here tonight. She is the proposed manager. As you said, I think you're familiar with the location. 4,000 square feet is the location. It's the area inside. 88 seats is what they have. The proposed hours are largely unchanged. They're going to go Sunday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m. till 10 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays, 11:30 till 11 p.m., so it's largely what they have now. There's a lounge bar there, and they have buffet on the weekends. Asian cuisine menu won't change markedly from what they have now. They do intend at some point down the line, and we should be in shortly before you with an alteration of the premises for the inclusion of a sushi bar. So they intend to include one of those shortly. As I said, Terry Moe is going to be the proposed manager. She's got excellent alcohol and restaurant experience from 2008 to 2012. She was a bartender at Mandarin Taste, that was in Plymouth, New Hampshire. From 2014 to 2016, she worked the front desk and cashier at Teriyaki House, that was in Somerville. And 2016 to 2017, she was a waitress at Sichuan Gourmet, that was in Framingham. And currently, she is a waitress at the Chinatown restaurant in Stoughton. She's a U.S. citizen. She has had her alcohol training. I believe her certificate has been supplied with the package. And she'll be there 40 hours plus. We've talked to her, although I don't think we necessarily needed to, but it's always a good refresher. We talked about the importance of alcohol training for all of her staff. So I think before they open, they're going to have a trainer come in and just basically do everybody there. So everybody will be updated on it. In addition to the transfer of the license, there's also an entertainment license being applied for this evening. It's nothing more than conversational background, CD music, and a couple of televisions. But other than that, no change. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, any questions? Mr. Shea, anything?
Nothing for me?
Ms. Bracchio?
No.
All right, I would agree. Everything seems very.
The one thing I just want to point out, originally, this was listed on the agenda, which was amended including an alteration of premises. However, given the location of the restaurant, abutters notices would need to be done in both Southborough and Ashland, and that could not be done in time. This was something that the applicant wanted to take care of, get this piece of it done now, so they will be coming forward at some point for the alteration of premises at a future meeting. So just to kind of tee that up for the board.
All right. So I would move that we approve the transfer license for the Rose Garden as provided in our packet. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations and
Good
thank
luck.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have an update on the downtown survey. Mr. McKay, Chairman of the EDC. Mr. McKay, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Julie, welcome.
Selectmen, good to see you all. Thanks for having us. I know we're sort of a late addition to your agenda, so I appreciate you kind of fitting us in, and I know you've got a packed agenda, so Julie and I are going to try and move quickly through this. I'm Dave McKay. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee. Julie is the vice chair of the committee. I understand that you thanked and acknowledged Pam DiGiovanni, our Economic Development Coordinator, earlier, but I'd be remiss if I didn't do the same thing. We recently met with the advisory committee, which happened to be the day that I learned that Pam was moving on to greener pastures and taking her family down to North Carolina. She's been a delightful employee and an outstanding economic development coordinator. We're really going to miss her. I'm going to miss her as a friend. I'm going to miss having her as our economic development coordinator. So I certainly want to acknowledge the great service that she has done to our town in a part-time position, doing much more than part-time work for our town. So she really, really deserves our thanks and appreciation, and she certainly gets it from me and the rest of the committee. So I also want to thank the Board of Selectmen as well, because you folks have been strong supporters of the Economic Development Committee. I'll admit I'm a bit biased, and our committee is a bit biased. We think this is some of the most important work that gets done in this town. And the reason for that is because economic development is community development. And I think folks kind of lose the sense of that sometimes. And that's one of the reasons why we asked to come before you and to present to you on what we're doing with regard to the downtown. Economic development and community development is all about creating a better community for our residents. There is obviously a business-related component to that, but the whole exercise is designed to create a better community, to get the kinds of jobs in our community that our residents want, to get the kinds of amenities and businesses in our community that our residents want, all of it designed at the end of the day to make Southborough a better place to live and work for the people that live here. So one of the questions that we've been asked since our committee was set up is, what are you doing on the downtown? And being a lawyer, I naturally turn that question back to folks saying, well, what do you want us to do about the downtown? And I'll admit, we've gotten different answers from different folks as to what they think we really ought to be doing with regard to downtown. And so we've come up with a plan, a two-step plan, that ultimately we're going to ask for your buy-in at the end of the evening for how to kind of move forward on that. And this is really intended to kind of capitalize on the momentum from the 2008 master plan that the town did, and more recently, the fine work that's been done on the Main Street project and the Main Street Working Group. And so this kind of seemed like the right time for us to dip our toe into that water and to try and figure out what it is that the residents want the town to be doing with regard to the downtown, and then finally, how can we execute on that? So this is, as I mentioned, a two-step process. The first step I'm going to talk about, and then Julie's going to take the more substantive piece, which is the ULI TAP program. But the first step, in order to kind of get to the ULI TAP program, is a survey. So we've put together a pretty basic survey that I'll admit was a lot, in concept it sounded easy to do, but in reality it was kind of harder to put together than I thought. But we put a lot of thought into it. We think we've come up with a good survey. And really, at the end of the day, all it's really designed to do is to find out what people like about the downtown, what they don't like about the downtown, and what they want to see improved. And then from that, we go to step 2, which is really where Julie comes in with the ULI TAP program. So take it away.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you guys for having us and for hearing us out on this initiative that we're really excited about. Like Dave said, since our committee started 4 years ago, the question that we get all the time from our residents and our neighbors and our friends is what's going on with downtown and how can we improve it? And it's kind of been the elephant in the room because that seemed like such a daunting task. But earlier this spring, right around the time that we learned that the Main Street Workers was going to actually come together, we also had what has become our biannual broker breakfast, which has been a really successful event. And I know many of you have had the opportunity to go to them, and if you haven't, we have one coming up in September, which I encourage everyone to attend. But in the one that we had this past spring, we had the director of the Urban Land Institute, her name is Michelle Landers, come and give a presentation to us about what the Urban Land Institute is and different programs that they have. And one of the programs that she spoke to us about was called the TAP program. It's Technical Assistance Program. And what the ULI is, it's a group of real estate related people, urban planners, engineers, developers, people who are into sustainability and green development and parks and recreation and things like that. And so they have this program where they assist communities and taking the ideas from master plans or other initiatives that they want to do and figuring out the best way to execute them. So that's what the TAP program is. And they're really big on responsible use of land. They're big on sustainability. They're big on developing thriving communities. And the scope of the work that they can do can range from the minute little project on one parcel or an infrastructure or water management issue, which we're all very familiar with in this town, to much larger projects. So we thought that the first step was to figure out, what do we even want, because we don't know. So our first step, as Dave talked about through the survey, is to take the anecdotal evidence that we've been hearing over the past several years and to convert that into some hard data that we can present to the town and say, we've asked, and this is what you've told us. And so we think that the key to making this successful and making this something that will be palatable to the town, because we all know how difficult it is to get projects like this off the ground, is to be incredibly transparent, to take a page out of the Main Street Working Group's playbook and just really emphasize community involvement, to take the data that we have, to present it in a clear way, to have open meetings, to get as much input as we can and figure out what this project could or should look like. We've talked about everything from walkability and connectability to having a defined downtown area, to wastewater management, to zoning and parking issues. We've talked about different amenities that people might like, or parks or green space, and all of these are within the scope of things that ULI would be able to help us with through the TAP program. So all we're really asking at this point is to hopefully get your support to take this first step, to kind of see what is out there, what we might want, and how we can hone this into something that's actually a deliverable project that will build on the work that we're doing through the Main Street project that's coming up next year, and take that step beyond just the infrastructure of the road itself into beautification, into, you know, whatever it is that the residents want. So, so that's all we're really looking for right now. We're doing this clearly with an eye towards keeping Southborough, the town that we all love, with its bucolic charm and all the things that the residents love about Southborough. But we hope that you will support us in taking this first step.
Questions for the EDC?
Just curious on the survey, timing of it, the format that you're planning to utilize. Do you have any of those details?
Yeah, so
for
we
it?
have all the details because it's actually just went live as of today.
Okay.
We're using SurveyMonkey, which is a very user-friendly tool, and it has just gone live, and we're planning on rolling it out in every way that we can, definitely through the use of My Southborough, through email lists, just trying to reach as many people as we can. I'm also on the Town Meeting Review Committee, and we did a survey which had a fair amount of success, and I think we can more than replicate that just because of the nature of the work that we're doing and the interest level that I assume many people in our town will have interest in weighing in on, so.
No, I think August tends to be a ghost town around here. Hopefully it will continue into September.
Yes, actually,
maybe
yeah,
even
so
early
we're
October as
rolling
well.
it out and gonna be pushing it, and then we're actually planning on wrapping it up about mid to end of September, and publicizing it, and we have a lot of ideas about how we wanna publicize it, and we'll certainly keep you up to date as to what we're doing.
You will get tired of hearing.
Thank you. I just would like to say, I attended the EDC meeting, and so I've already seen the survey, I've already seen the questions. I think it's a really great thing. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the public's response to it
Me too.
and what is most important to the public with what they'd like to see with our downtown, so.
Thank
good
you,
job.
Lisa, and thank you for joining all of our meetings recently. We appreciate that. Also, just because it hasn't been mentioned yet, Pam did roll out a draft of the survey to you guys and to all the department heads, seeking any feedback and input that people will have. We realize this is, whatever is going to happen is going to require a cross-utilization of all of our efforts and across different departments, so we really hope that we can build up some positive momentum around it and, you know, get as many people involved as we can.
Yeah, and along those lines, the only other thing that I would emphasize is that the ULI process itself is intentionally designed to be a very open and public process. And so they will structure as, they basically descend upon your town for an entire day, and they do site walks, and they also schedule meetings with different stakeholder groups to try and get a sense of some of the differing views within different groups within the community as to how to kind of move forward. So this is a process that obviously we're trying to solicit and receive broad feedback from a lot of folks and a lot of different constituencies, but the ULI process itself is also designed to do the same thing. So we feel pretty comfortable that this is not going to be a process that anybody, you know, won't have an opportunity to, you know, weigh in on quite heavily, and that's the whole idea, right? So.
Just, yeah, I meant to include that in my part as well, that we'll submit an application. We've already, but we won't submit it until after we get the survey results and have had a chance to digest the data and get some feedback. And at that point, then we'll schedule a time for them to come, but they'll already have information about our town, information about the results of the kinds of things we might be looking for, and they'll bring in their team of professionals from across the spectrum, the 6 to 12 people they bring in, and they schedule meetings with different town leaders, so I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that as it gets closer, and then they'll prepare a report based on our requests of what we're looking for about the feasibility of a few different projects.
And I'll just add, you know, I'm at virtually every meeting as well, and they're outstanding, and the amount of work that's done in anticipation of those meetings from Pam and the rest of the committee has been amazing. This is one of those initiatives. What I really liked about it is the collaborative nature that ULI brings to this with, you know, leaders within the community, our residents, and our business owners, all of whom, you know, are going to have great opportunity to all, you know, add content to as to what, you know, this downtown, you know, could be. And I've spoken with business owners in that downtown district, and they would love to see some additional foot traffic and car traffic in there. It's been too long since you know, a number of those restaurants and businesses have been full, and it'd be great to see that return. And part of that is, you know, what ULI can help us envision as to what it might look like. So I'm fully supportive. Other members, Lisa, yes. Mr. Shea, yes. So you've got a supportive board behind you, so.
Great, we appreciate that.
Thank you for your work.
All right,
Alrighty.
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so our next item is the Golf Course Committee interviews and appointments. We have a few that we haven't heard from before. Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So tonight, the board had previously established a golf course committee, which consisting of up to 7 members was the number the board settled on, consisting of at-large representatives of the community with professional backgrounds, qualifications consistent with those needed for design, maintenance, and operation of a municipal golf course facility in Massachusetts. 2 ex officio members, not counting towards a quorum, one being the town administrator, the second being a member designated from the Public Safety Building Committee. I think you heard earlier this evening, Mr. Malinowski, recommend to you that the committee has suggested that Mr. Rooney be that person, and they had voted that he be the ex officio member to the Golf Course Committee. Tonight, before you, you know, first of all, we couldn't get people. Now we have 12 that we have, and there are 4 people who are before you this evening for interviews. The way that this board has done it, and the chair had asked that it continue, is that if we have people who are applying for positions who are already on boards and committees, who you've seen recently for issues or for volunteer work, then there's no need to make them come back in. You have some familiarity with them. But we do have 4 people this evening before you that are on the agenda. Kevin Battles, Eric Summerhalter, Louis Pilecki, and Sheila Montrastelli. There are 2 other people, Adam Fruitman and Joyce McNoskis, who would have come in for interviews, but unfortunately they had previous commitments. They did ask me to both express that they're disappointed that they could not be here this evening, and that should the board not fill the committee, all the seats this evening, they would like to be considered, you know, at some point moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there, and with that, I'll turn that over to the chair for the interviews.
So I'm thinking if we have 4 individuals here that can come up at the same time and share the microphone, is that okay?
Yep, sounds great.
Most efficient? Welcome. So we're, the others, so others that are, so we'll have 2 seats other ways. You can do 2 and 2, you can do 4 across, whatever works for you guys, but you gotta share microphones. There we go, that's perfect. We have 3, okay, so. All right, so, yeah, so if you would, sir, we'll start with you, if you could let us know.
I'm Lou Pilecki,
Yes,
70
sir.
Marlboro
Good to
Road.
see you again, sir.
Good to see you again. I'm very much interested in serving because I view the golf course as really a central part of the character of the town. I've enjoyed it for the 30 years I've been here. I see really the hardest part of the whole problem, or I should say the easiest part of the whole problem, is reconfiguring the golf course. Everything else that surrounds that in terms of making a sustainable amenity in the town from the purposes of what the organization, the capital needs, short-term planning for the transition and the costs that relate to the reconfiguration. All these things kind of swirl together in a very large and complicated problem, and I'd like to contribute to making an impact on that. I do have experience in long-range planning, strategic planning, so I could certainly contribute on that, and I finally have at least recently stopped traveling enough so that I can contribute a little bit more to the town than I have in the past, so I'd very much like to be a part of that. Thank you.
Do we want to do, what do you guys want, do you want to do questioning one-on-one? You want to do statements and then we'll question?
No,
Any
I think
preference?
if they I want to offer a statement to
Yeah,
support the
we
information that
start out.
Absolutely.
they
Ma'am.
previously submitted.
No, I'm Sheila. Sheila Montrestelli. I live at 43 Woodland Road with my husband. We've been residents for 19 years in the town, and I'm an avid golfer. I'm on the board of directors of the Women's Golf Association of Massachusetts, and I'm being nominated to be on the Massachusetts Golf Association subcommittee next year as the Women's Golf Association merges with the MGA. I'm in the camp of no one wanted to do it, so I might as well do it. I've never served on a committee and never been involved in anything with town government. But I do see the golf course as an asset to the town, and in general, preserving golf courses is an important thing. I golf out of a private club nearby. I admit I golfed at the golf course once, and it was about 20 years ago. But that said, I see it as a very important thing to preserve 9-hole golf courses, municipal golf courses that are drying up around the state. My background, educationally and professionally, I'm an engineer by education. I was an engineer and engineering manager at Digital and then Intel Corporation in Hudson for about 15 years. I haven't worked in about 9 years. I have a lot of free time on my hands, even more when golf season's over. So that's my story.
Excellent, thank you, sir.
Kevin Battles, 11 Lattisquama Road, butter to the golf course. And really my interest in this committee, but first off, I'm pretty passionate about the golf course. I grew up in town. I actually learned how to play golf on that course as early as I can remember, hitting the houses on Lattisquama on the 7th hole, probably a few windows broken by me. So the committee will be certainly getting a dedicated member that's looking for creative ways to save what we have and whatever options we can come up with to save this course. Second, probably like many others on the committee are looking for consideration. I'm an avid golfer. So as we look to reconfigure the course and perhaps position it in a different way to golfers, one of the things that the golf industry is struggling with is people don't have time to play, and 9-hole courses are actually a great option for that. So as we strategize on how to use this asset, I think I can provide a good point of view, because I'm that person that has a job, has 3 kids, would love to play more, but gets maybe 6 rounds a year in. Love to get my handicap in the single digits where it used to be, but unfortunately I just don't have the time. And I think there's an opportunity for this type of an asset to be utilized for someone like me, as long as the course is in good enough shape where it's willing for me to go out and play it. And then finally, my background is in sales and marketing. So I think I can provide the committee a point of view where we can effectively communicate not only the pros, but also the cons of the options for the town, so that when we're looking at this from all the key stakeholders, whether it's recreation, golfers, taxpayers, and the like, that we put an effective message in front of them so they're well educated in making this decision. I think I can effectively do that. That's what I do for a living. I also negotiate quite a bit in my job, and not only externally when I'm selling to somebody, but also internally in internal stakeholders, which certainly will be involved here. So based on my passion for the course and my background, I think I can provide some value for the committee.
Questions for
Excellent.
any of the 3?
Very impressed with the statements you've made and what you offer, and I think, we've gone from, a couple of weeks ago where we were begging for people to join the committee to now we have, 12 strong, or a number of strong candidates, each of whom, bring a different perspective and offer different things. And certainly with the folks we've heard from just recently right now, it's being able to reach out to people that haven't been on committees, aren't currently on committees, to touch upon contacts that you have in town that to pull them in, get them involved, I think would be great. So I think we have a good opportunity to have a mix with younger people, plus also some people who are more experienced at playing the course, with other people who've applied as well. And I think that would present us with a great committee to work from to ensure the long-term sustainability of the course. So I think we have a difficult choice to narrow it down to the 7 candidates, but I think either way we go, I think we're going to have a strong group. And so.
I also commend all of you for coming forward. I don't think initially, I second what Brian said, we went from, a couple candidates to 12, and the town is very well served by the public coming out, and it is refreshing to see people that haven't served before come forward. Again, seconding what Brian said. I think it's a very, very important charge of this committee, whoever's going to sit on it. Town meeting and the selectmen are very supportive of the golf course. I think that was pretty obvious. So, again, I thank you for coming forward, and you haven't given us an easy choice to make, so thank you.
And I'll also ask, did Mr. Summerhalter, did Mr. Summerhalter arrive? Sir? All right, so maybe what we do, so thank you all. All right, thank you. So I think Mr. Cruciani, Mr. Fortin, Mr. McNamara, Mr. Summerhalter, I believe, if any of those individuals, may have been interviewed before. But if they have a statement or of interest that they want to make tonight as well, feel free, the microphone here or here. And then the other names on our list were Mr. Perry, Mr. Boland, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Fruitman, and then Joyce Magnauskas. Okay. Okay. So we have 12, and we're looking for 7 at this point. Sir, please.
Good evening to the board. I'm Dick Cruciani, 4 Ted Lane, Southborough. I am a member over at St. Mark's Golf Course. I'm also an employee. Okay. And I have talked to Mr. Purple, and I had a problem because I worked there, and I did file with the Ethics Commission to get a report. And I'm not sure, I talked to Mr. Purple a couple days ago, and we sent it to the town council. And I would be interested to see what the town council had to say about it.
Please.
So yes, Mr. Cruciani had received an opinion from the Ethics Commission, and again, that's a confidential document. He offered to share that with me. I provided it to town council, and town council provided his opinion that he concurs with the legal findings of the Ethics Commission, and essentially it is up to this board. He basically passed it back to you and said it's up to this board as to, obviously there are some conflicts, that Mr. Cruciani has. It's up to the board as to whether you want to appoint him knowing that those conflicts exist. So it's really, it's following the Ethics Commission. It's basically putting it back in the hands of this board as to, as to how you want to approach that with that understanding.
And as with all of our candidates, even if not selected, we want lots of participation in this. So, but we'll see how that one goes. Thank you, Mr. Purple.
Okay.
All right, sir.
Could I finish this thing? Okay. I understand the position. Okay. I'm kind of putting the Board of Selectmen and also myself in sort of a position of could be yes, could be no, could have trouble, and I understand that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to respectfully withdraw, okay? And I would like to, I started the golf committee with John Wilson initially, and initially I had to go to meetings and I had to talk as a citizen. And what I would like to do, I would like to come to the meetings and talk, and I hope whoever's appointed on the board would kind of listen to me a little bit. And maybe I can serve the town and also be kind of a liaison from the management company and the golf course. Okay, so I want to thank Mr. Purple, and I want to thank you all
Well,
for entertaining.
and I want to thank you as well. When the concept of the public safety complex at the golf course property first came up, you were the first one at meetings that we held. You've been very professional through them all. You've been very, very influential and helpful through the process this spring. Strong advocate for the golf course as well. When I saw that you had applied, I was hoping that I would be able to appoint you.
Yes.
And with the document that we saw, I just saw so many opportunities where you'd have to step down, and I just would hate to see you in a position where somebody would, call into question whether you should have had to vote on that or not. So
I
thank you for stepping down. I wish I could have appointed you, but I think you're doing the right thing.
Okay.
And I strongly encourage you to keep participating.
Let me say this, I'm not going to go away.
Excellent.
Okay?
Excellent.
Good
And I thank you
news.
very much.
Also, I would just, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Cruciani on the Master Plan Golf Course Committee. And I never thought I would understand or appreciate golf, and through you, I have been able to do that. It's unfortunate that you're not going through on this committee, but I know you will attend the meetings, and I know that you will bring your wonderful insight and your passion for golf that you have brought all along. I commend you for that, and I thank you very much.
And I thank you also. Okay?
Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to, applaud Mr. Cruciani on his decision. We've had several conversations about this, and, his value to the work that the committee is going to do is based on the work that he does for the golf group managing that course. And with him as a member of that committee, the committee would not have the benefit of that expertise. So because of this decision, the committee is going to get the benefit of his expertise. And that is a very selfless, way to approach that. And so I appreciate that you're going to, be very valuable to the committee as they move forward with this. So thank you.
I thank you also, Mr. Purple.
Thank you. Sir.
No, I was actually, I'm a little disappointed to hear that, because I was gonna say that you should definitely appoint Dick. That's too bad. But no, I just wanted to say, I'm really passionate about it. I think you guys know that I've been really trying to do the best that I can to put the golf course in as positive a light as possible. I think that it's a great course. I think it does need work. It's not perfect, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of golf in this town, and anything I can do to help preserve it and continue it, I want to have a part in. So.
And you've been an early advocate.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may just add one
Please.
comment, I know Mrs., I can't pronounce her last name, Joyce's last name.
McNosk.
Thank you. I have served with Joyce, I know she's not here, but I have worked with her. She's a warden for the polls during the elections. I have had the pleasure of working with her. She is really easy to work with. She works well with everyone. I know she's an avid golfer. So seeing as she's not here to say something on her behalf, I just wanted to throw that in, that I have had experience working with her, and it's always been positive.
Okay.
And my only comment, I will piggyback on Mrs. Braccio, is that she does senior tax work-off in our office, in the Selectmen's office. And she is wonderful, and if she wasn't such an avid golfer and avid skier, we'd get more time with her. But she does have a great history with us in doing that work. We appreciate that.
All right, so we've got 12. We'll narrow it down to 7 tonight. Mr. Shea?
So, well, I will, I'll take the easy one first. I'll first move that we confirm Mr. Rooney's appointment as the ex officio member.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Rooney, there it is. All right.
So I was, again, very impressed with the 3 people that we interviewed first, and I would nominate or recommend that we appoint Kevin Battles, Lou Pilecki, and Sheila Monterastelli.
So I completely agree on all three. That's 2 votes, we need 3, well, we
Three.
only need 2, but what do you think?
3.
All right, so, and I'll also, I will obviously want to add Mr. Wilson.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Shea, thoughts on
Yep.
Mr. Wilson? All right, so we have, that's 5, so, and that's 4?
It's 4 voting. Mr. Rooney is ex officio.
Okay,
So 3. I'd like to see Mr. Boland.
so would I.
I agree.
So that's 5.
That's 5.
Mr. Fortin.
I was going to say Mr.
Okay.
Fortin's name next as well.
Yep.
I think it would be, and he was very influential, very involved with that unofficial committee, working with Dick. I think his involvement in this committee would be a great benefit as well.
And for discussion, Mrs. I can't pronounce her last name, and I'm going to butcher it.
Agnoskis.
McNoskis. Only because I've had such positive interactions with her, and I know she currently doesn't serve on the board either, so that's for discussion.
So I
All
will,
right, so right now we have, yep, Mr. Battles, yep, Ms. Monticelli, Mr. Pilecki, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Boland, Mr. Fortin, and if we add Ms. McNoskis, that would be 7. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
I'll put that into a motion if.
I would move those 7. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
aye,
Aye. All right.
aye. And
So,
thanks to Mr. McNamara as well, though,
I'm
for stepping up.
confident he's going to be at all the meetings, I
Well,
hope.
I
and
believe
as
so
well as
well.
Mr. Cruciani.
Yep.
But we limited ourselves for, I think, good reasons to 7, and we're very happy with those and everyone who stepped up to volunteer, so thank you all. Okay. Is Mr. Hagerty here? Ms. Galligan? Yeah.
So I just wanted to give a couple quick updates because Mr. Purple thought it would be beneficial for the board to know some of the stuff that was going on, especially some of the stuff that's obvious, and people want to know where it is at. The first thing is the IMA with the town of Ashland. This will come up to you at another point when it's really finalized, but we've talked about this project before where there's $1.8 million worth of work being done on the water system. A little bit, probably 1.2 of it is actually just for Southborough, and the rest, that other 0.6 million is partially for, so that Ashland can have a pit to hook into, and we end up with a valve, of altitude valve at one of our tanks, which we wouldn't do on our own if we wouldn't need it. So with that work being done, that Ashland is looking to close out the IMA. They have money put aside already through, it's one of the grants that you get for being able to bring an industry in, and it's basically part of developing that site that they have. I want to call it Nuremberg, but that's not the right site. That's the MWRA site. But they're basically developing a site. As part of that, they get a grant. That grant will run out soon, so they want to start working on this project. So the residents of Ashland are putting money into this also, but this will help. These improvements to the Hosmer water pumping station, which is at the end of Central Street, and there's also a little bit of water main work. That's something that's been in our master plan for years to get done, and it was going to be next on, in our next 5 years plan. So this is great because someone else is paying for it and we're getting it done.
Yep. And as I understood that, not to interrupt you, but those are contracts that the town will actually be putting out, the town of Southborough will be putting out, but be paid by Ashland for that?
Yeah, so the contract, because the work's on our system, it's our engineer
They're doing all the design, they're running the contract, so it really ends up bidding out through us, and where Ashland's paying for all that work, and they're paying the consultant, but we're able to control it and make sure that we're getting what we need, because it's our assets. So Ashland's been very generous with helping work this out. Corderville Road, this is a project that we had put in probably 6-8 years ago to try to get onto the tip with Corderville Road, when we, just probably the year after Main Street. That's not going to move forward as a tip project at this point, but partly because the tip has changed and there's some issues. But this, I just wanted to put it on your radar. You guys did approve Chapter 90 expenditures for the design on this project already, and we're going to have our first meeting with residents in September, so we'll be contacting all the Corderville Road residents about that. I think people are looking forward to getting a better sidewalk, getting some drainage fixed down there. I mean, the pavement, everything, it needs it. But it's such a big project, it's hard for the town to bite off on its own. So we really need a design engineer for that. As part of that, that update, Legacy Farms in Hopkinton, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think at the time Gene Kitchen was the town administrator. It was either Vera or Eric was the planner. I know Jane was police chief. I think John was the fire chief at the time. So we had all worked together to get some money put aside in the FEIR for Legacy Farms to do some work on Corderville Road. And I have no idea how that next step goes, so I wanted to bring it forward so that you're aware that there is some money that they are supposed to give the town of Southborough for basically off-site improvements. And they were destined for Corderville Road work, and it's something that I know Don Morris was on the planning board then too, so he might know where the reins go for this, but it's just generally, it's not something that sits with the DPW, so I'm not 100% sure. I just want to make you aware that there's that money out there, and it'd be a great time to try to claim it. We also have Deerfoot and Flag intersection. I know at the last meeting when we did the truck exclusions, you guys heard from some of the residents at that location. The chief, Mark Purple, and I, also people from Ken's Food, were in attendance at the intersection. We met with the neighbors. They were great, gave us a lot of feedback, and ultimately, we're really going back to that safety study, which was done for Flag Road, and the changes to that intersection, which were geometrical changes, which would actually slow down vehicles but make the turn a little more. There was a picture in the packet, but makes the turn more of a 90-degree turn rather than a fork in the road. The feeling behind that is that should help them with their having property. Basically, their private property is getting kind of torn up quite a bit from some of these 18-wheelers going through or thinking they can make it through the intersection, and they can't. So, I've been contacting the GPS, actually, because Mr. Litt had mentioned that, which was very helpful. So I've been doing that to get that intersection kind of taken out of the concept of a decent truck route, but also the ultimate goal is that I actually have a Chapter 90 in front of you to sign on your consent agenda so that we can use Chapter 90 money to do the design and construction of that intersection. And that was something that we had committed to the residents around that intersection. The Main Street project, that is moving forward. The appraisals are complete. I need to get you guys a disc of them if you want to see them, but it's not something I can email in one email. We can't currently contact residents still. We are waiting. The DOT wants to make sure, it's really the post and rail fence out at the Common has delayed their final approval because they had a concern on how we're going to replicate that appropriately. And right now, the Historical Commission and I have talked a few times about how we might manage that as more of a local project. So that should be moving forward. The choke lights, which is probably what a lot of people want to know about. To say it's not going smoothly is a real gross understatement. The project the kind of from conception on, it really didn't quite have the funding it needed. Money wasn't put into the engineering that probably should have been, in terms of letting the project carry through an engineer versus trying to manage it, do a project management locally through the department heads. So at this point, I know that there was an issue because there was a generator on site to try to power the lights. That generator's gone. The site's been cleaned up, but we're still working with the original engineer, with the lighting company, and the electric company of the lighting company, to actually figure out how to get the service in there better. Because National Grid basically can't provide the same service that they originally had. So it's a problem that becomes a utility problem, which is problematic just trying to work with utilities and get what you need out of them. I know there are other, and because that's going to be the next question, there's these other light projects out there that REC has funded. We've basically, through the process that we've done, the control of the projects has basically really come to the DPW. It'll go through, we'll have an engineer design and stay through the whole construction process, and those projects were funded at the appropriate amount. We were able to really work on that better than the CHOTE didn't really work out that way. Not necessarily, that was an issue too, just if you remember, one of the poles fell that was wood way back in, and it was a little bit of a panic of liability that people were like, well, just get something. And then just doing something doesn't obviously ever work in this town. So 9/11 field, so that project, from when I wrote this to now, has actually had a new glitch. That was funded as though the project just needed to put new turf on. So we pulled the turf off, put new turf on, we're good. We wanted to do some test pits because we did have frost heaves. We knew there were some issues with drainage on that field. This is being run through the DPW through an engineering firm. And when we did the test pits, we found that the project wasn't really built the way we had been told it had been built. So there's, it really doesn't drain at all. The material really that was put there drains less than the material that was originally there. We have some other issues we have to do. We had gotten a very great price, almost practically a donation of some turf that we were going to be able to make work. And then we found out that estimate on that turf was incorrect. So at this point, the engineers have it back in their lap to see if there are options that can be done. The option might be that it's not worth moving forward to do something with that field at this time because we won't have the money. So it might have to be that, which causes a lot of problems for recreation, obviously, with their funding, because they do take money in. But you'll end up hearing more about this as soon as we have better information and more. But that is something that it might have to go back to town meeting for some more money. So I had two other things, but then I just want a couple other updates that I had forgotten to put on. So Central Street, if anybody's been down there looking for that Central Street playground, that's moving forward. We're actually doing really well on that. Drainage is almost completely in. There's a couple spots that aren't draining, so we're just trying to tag up to those. If you look, there's a bunch of structures in place. Our goal is to have that done by end of summer. And I know people think end of summer as the end of August. That's not accurate. So we go by the true weather. So not weather, I'm sorry, the actual year. So September 21st is our hope that we're done. And that is possible, I believe. Also, we're in process of trying to replace our underground storage tanks for our fueling station down at the DPW. We went through the CONCOM process, but after talking with the chiefs one more time, we came to the conclusion that we really wanted to have a canopy on those. Now we have to actually, in order to put the canopy over, because they're going to be above ground tanks, to put the canopy on. We actually are going to move that. We're going to go back through the Concom process, but we should be able to start that. That project will get going, I believe, in beginning of September. We'll probably start breaking ground on it. Town Hall, you guys kind of know about this. It's really a facilities project, the septic system. They have to do an emergency septic replacement. One of the options is to put the leach field, rather than, right now it's under the playground that's out there. And rather than take down the playground, put up a new playground, and also deal with the historic stone walls, we can actually put the leach field under the asphalt. Doing that is, would actually gives us gives us a little more continuity with the service, because you can build it before you hook it and unhook the other. But one of the things that I would like to come back on another time is with that, we know we have some drainage issues out here in the town hall, and trying to do, if we're going to be digging up one section, try to work to get the town hall parking lot fixed. We also know we need some parking. I think it's worth looking at basically doing like a stabilized grass parking over by the old flag school. I know that the historical commission was talking about trying to put over by the flag school like a historical park, but maybe they could do that downtown in that property at the corner of East Main and Newton. I mean, we come up with some other ideas. And if we're going to be looking at all that together, it's probably, and I keep pushing this and I apologize, but it's really worth looking at trying to work with St. Mark's about that piece of land at the corner of St. Mark's Street and Marlborough Road, and trying to figure out if there's a way we can do either a stabilized gravel or a stabilized grass parking area there that can be used at Heritage Day, can be used at funerals, could be used by Pilgrim Church, can be used by St. Mark's. And obviously that would hook in with our library parking lot that currently exists, which then also could benefit St. Mark's as well.
So what do you need, if anything, from us to move forward with that initiative?
I will be back with some better information about all of that. But it would be nice to group it all into one big project. I think that's really what the problem is. It's money. So then the last two things that were actually already on the list, memorials. I get requests all the time for people wanting to memorialize. It's different if it's a memorial for, hey, this person just loved the town and we'd like to dedicate a bench at the cemetery. That is easy for us to deal with. But if it's someone who's had years of great service and have done a lot of things for the town through either by working here or by being a volunteer, those are a little harder. And I had attached a letter that I got from Leo Pacini's granddaughter, as well as kind of an outline of what Mr. Pacini contributed in this town. And although there is currently actually on Chestnut Hill Road, there is a road going in, and maybe that could be named after him, but Planning Board doesn't currently have a list of names they're trying to do. We have this kind of hole in the town. You guys did just come up with a new naming for buildings and for rooms, but we don't have a list for streets, and we really don't have a way to memorialize all the people. We have so many of them who've contributed, part of the fabric of the town. And it's just a suggestion that maybe we can look into building like a memorial wall that's more specifically for people who have contributed out in the front of the town hall, or even in the old dog pound. Oh, it's not dog pound, it's just the town pound. The town pound right out back here, where you could have some benches and you could sit and you could look at people's names. That's just a thought, but I do need to get back to Mrs. Pacini with, well, her name's not Pacini, but to get back with them about something, because this is something that they've really been working on for years with the planning board, and we haven't, nothing's come up. Nothing has ever come to fruition. And the last item I have is just a quick warning for everybody about safety. I don't, because people are very used to seeing we only have 12 total people in the DPW. You're used to seeing most of them. But if they're running a loader or they're running a backhoe or any kind of equipment, at that point, they're in charge of that, but they're not there to chat and talk, and it's really unsafe to kind of approach that equipment without without making sure you make eye contact and the person's aware that you're coming. You know, when we dig test pits, because we're about to do some on Main Street, but we also, when we were doing them at 9/11 Field, you know, people come and they don't kind of realize that it's nerve-wracking for the operator. So it's just make sure, just as a global, if you're on a board or committee and you want to go see something that's happening, that you ask first and you check. And, you know, you can call DPW and we can check and find out, or if you see someone sweeping on the road and, you know, they're in the sweeper and you want something special done, call the DPW and we can contact them, but don't necessarily approach the machine. So it's just keep people safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galligan. Comment? Yes, ma'am.
Desiree Asselbekian, 137 Woodland Road. Well, boy, does that Miss Galligan have a lot going on. Jesus. My comment, and it was just a little tiny snippet of all the things that are happening. In regard to allocating Chapter 70s for Flag Road, Deerfoot, kind of reconfiguration, I guess my global question is, why are we allocating Chapter 90 money when we've identified that much of the erosion and the issues with the street is relative to trucks, relative to Ken's Foods, relative to these other things? I may be wrong about that. I'm not specifically requesting that you do something. I guess my global question and inquiry is, what is the role of your board, the ZBA, in terms of listing projects for mitigation? So when Ken's Foods, for example, is going before the ZBA for a permitting process, of which they were granted, I believe, where does something like this, that Ms. Galligan has a list of things that need to go on, capital improvement projects in our town, where are we in that we make that request in condition of giving that permit, you give us such and such money to do this engineering of this road, because you're in part contributing to some of the issues of this road. So as a taxpayer, well, I completely concur with Ms. Galligan that something needs to be done in that area. I'm questioning the funding mechanism of public money versus potential for getting mitigation money so that it's not coming out of my and other folks' tax bill to solve a specific, a detailed problem that may be arising not just from public use of the area. So I'm not expecting a formal response to what I'm asking. I'm just suggesting that perhaps the board, with Mr. Purple, Ms. Galligan's help, even the coordination with Mr. Dennington of the ZBA, really look at what we could be asking developers or projects for mitigation to help us. Okay.
Mr. Purple, do you have something to add on that?
Just something briefly. I mean, Ms. Asselbekian makes a very good point. I just want to offer one thing. I don't want to, you know, have Ken's Foods kind of thrown under the bus. No, and I know that was not your intention, but I just want to clarify. I mean, they've been very good partners in trying to work with the town, and you know, and the chief is here this evening as well. You know, and we've tried to log every, you know, complaint that's been received about trucks that have ended up on people's property and trucks going down this way, and it's less than one hand's worth of trucks that can be tied back to Ken's Foods. Ken's has worked very well with the town in trying to make sure that, you know, when they send out packaging, you know, the packaging goes out with slips that gives them the directions, which tells them where to go, which tells them where they can't go. And again, they showed up at that meeting with the residents on site just to try and see if there were things they could do. They've put in requests to Mass DOT to try and get additional signage out on Route 9 to kind of inform the trucks where they need to turn earlier. and DOT has not been entirely responsive to that yet. We're hoping, as part of the truck exclusion requests, that will jumpstart that discussion to try and move along some of those requests. So even if the state does not want to consider the truck exclusion for Deerfoot and Flag, part of that is let's take a look at what Ken's is asking for the additional signage to try and curb some of that traffic and do that. So, but I think it's a great idea in terms of coming up with a list of projects. I mean, obviously, it's got to be within a certain area that an application is being asked for. But oftentimes, we get a request from ZBA, and it's been a while, but, so give us a list of projects. And then we've kind of got to scramble and think about that. But there are enough things going on. I think there are enough areas that we should be able to have something like that at the ready for those various areas, so that it's not something you need to ask for. It's something that we keep and we maintain moving forward. So
I agree.
I think that's something that we can work on.
Yeah, and the concept of mitigation is a good one. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
and I just want to clarify, I have no problems with Ken Foods and their application process and everything they're doing. Again, I think Mr. Purple kind of came back to the end of it. A mitigation program, some type of identification of what's there, and then disseminating that information to the appropriate groups and boards so that we can start benefiting from what people that want to come into our community, want to expand, can actually offer us as taxpayers.
Yep. Well stated. Thank you.
Can I make
Yes,
just one
ma'am.
comment? I would like to just thank Karen for this incredible list you've put together for us. I would like to also thank you for sitting with Mrs. Faniff and I on the Choate lights and coming to a great resolution on it. I appreciate it. And also, I've spoken to some of the residents that you and Mr. Purple and others had met with on Deerfoot and Flag, and I've heard very positive feedback from the public on the meeting and how receptive you've been. So thank you.
Mr. Haggerty. So we're going to discuss the possibility of some new voting equipment, as well as there's a proposal to consolidate 3 of the voting locations to 1. Mr. Haggerty.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. The town meeting last year approved capital item to purchase replacement items for the tabulators, which are the devices where people place their ballots when they finish up voting. Essentially, they're scanners. The machines that we have were purchased in the early 90s. They're fading fast. Spare parts are only available this year, then they're done. And we had a machine fail in, actually 2 failures at the presidential election. So in order for us to implement that change, the Secretary of State requires that a vote be taken by the board to authorize the use of the new machines and also to state the discontinuance of the machines. So that's why that's Article A there. It's the scanner. It's not the handicap machine that folks use, which is provided by the state, which is the one that allows people that are either hearing or sight impaired to read the ballot and to vote on that. This is just the scanner that you put your ballot in as you leave the building.
Okay, so in terms of voting itself, if those who have disabilities, nothing is going to affect, this is just the scanner itself once the ballot is cast, and it can handle any type of ballot that
Yes.
we may utilize, correct?
And it's accessible at wheelchair level as well.
Okay. Other towns, use the same equipment that you're aware of?
In fact, you can only purchase equipment that's been approved or certified by the Secretary of State's office, and there are only 2 vendors. And this is, they're pretty much Coke and Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is in use in, with 31 to 51 towns right now in the state.
Okay. Mr. Shea?
And we have purchased 3 of these units?
4, actually. We'll
4,
have 3 and a spare.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason we have the spare, it cost us, I want to say roughly $700 or $800 to rent a spare strictly for the presidential election. And when that machine failed, everything had to shut down while we went over to try to make it work. That sort of dovetails into the second piece of this as well. Kind of an interesting wrinkle about spares. Even though the vendor would deliver a spare, the state regulations do not allow you to use a spare unless it has been, that particular machine has been tested and certified ahead of time. So it doesn't do us any good unless we physically have one and we test it ahead of time. Sort of an archaic rule, but That's the world we live in.
Ms. Bracchio, any questions on the first part?
I've worked the election, so I'm well aware of the limited capabilities of some of these machines. so.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we can take the first one. And any
Sure.
questions on that one? I would, any comments on?
No, just make sure that the vote.
Okay. So the motion is a vote to approve the use of new voting equipment, image cast precinct tabulators, beginning with the special town election on November 7th, 2017, and discontinue the use of the current voting equipment, AccuVote OS tabulator. Is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent, okay.
Great,
Point
thank you.
number B. Consolidation effort.
Thank you. Okay, the state regulations require that a town of our size has to have 3 separate precincts based upon population. Now, our past practice has been to have each precinct vote in a separate location, one at Finn, one at Trotter, and one at Woodward. That's not a state requirement. That's entirely up to the Board of Selectmen. And I come here to recommend that you consolidate the voting so all 3 precincts vote in the Trotter gym. We've talked extensively to people in town, the supporters, Superintendent Johnson and Trotter Principal Keith Lavoie fully support this plan. I've talked to Police Chief Paulus, fully supports this. I've had an expert from the Secretary of State's ADA group come out to examine the Trotter to ensure that it is ADA compatible as well. So we would continue to have 3 separate precincts inside the Trotter gym. So in terms of voter experience, it'd be the same thing you have right now. You just walk into the gym and you'd have a line for precinct 1, 2, and 3. Nothing once you're inside the gym would change from what you have right now. It's just the physical going to the gym. So why do we want to do this? There are several reasons. The easy one is money. If we consolidate this, we'll save at least $2,000 per election and reduced cost for the police officer, the detail, also reduce programming costs for machines we have to have. We have to have one at each device. A very significant thing, especially to the schools, is we'll reduce the disruption to the Woodward and the Finn schools where adults are entering the school building while small kids are present. For those of us that vote at the Woodward school, you're walking right through the middle of that school while kids are coming out of the gym, they're coming out of the classrooms. For those who vote at Finn, you have kids on the other side of the gymnasium wall. You have people up in the parking lot trying to extend it after day school. And it's disruptive. Even in the Trotter, the band room, when you kick the band out of there, that affects the stage, and it's a domino effect going all the way down the halls. So the schools would be very appreciative if we get out of the 2 schools and use the gym. Now, the Trotter school, so let me just go on a couple more things and then go back to that. So one of the advantages of this, a big advantage, is this would provide easier access for the voters to the polls because the parking at the Trotter gym is all on the same level as the gymnasium. For people that go to the Woodward school, while the school is in session especially, oftentimes you have to park down below at the ball field, so you have to walk up the set of stairs to get to the driveway level, then you have to walk up a second set of stairs as well. Same thing at Finn. If you cannot get a space out front, and those are really hard to come by, especially when some of the election workers park there, you have to park down below, and then you have to navigate crawling up, walking up that embankment essentially to get inside the gym. At Trotter, it's all an even level. There are 6 handicap spaces right out in front. People walk right in that level. It's a straight shot all the way in. A big advantage to us from a clerk's perspective is that we would have our spare equipment and all the other things at that one location. The clerk would also have a table in the back of this as well. So when things pop up, like machines jamming, which happens on a regular basis, I mean, it's even affected by humidity, believe it or not. The ballots are folded. As people come in, if it's a rainy day, the water can literally fall off of people's hats and stuff and affect the creases. It jams the machines. And when that happens right now, most of the time you have to shut down the booth, the voting location, while Michelle or I travel from here down to that location to try to unjam the machine. So it'd be they would have the spare, we could address things on a pretty rapid basis. It's something that those of us that vote at every election don't pay attention to. But at every election, and I know Lisa's seen this, people show up at the wrong place. In fact, I was just talking to somebody out in the hall, and they brought up a point. Not everybody votes. You know, at a typical town election, we have 23% turnout. We had 82, I think, at the presidential. Frankly, there are people that show up at the wrong location, and they're embarrassed to say it. And we're not just talking 1 or 2, we're talking a whole bunch of people. So when these people show up at the Trotter, it doesn't make a difference. We'll put them on the other line. So it's an easy thing for everybody else. Another advantage of this, on election day, we draw a lot of resources from DPW facilities to bring equipment, to bring supplies, to set up all these 3 schools. the schools also have to shut down their gymnasiums and the other stuff the day before so we can set this stuff up as well. So there's a big savings. It's a savings for everybody there as well. Kind of an unanticipated benefit for this. If you approve this, well, the special election in November is probably going to be a pretty low turnout, just the one race, and that's what you'd think. But one of the consequences of approving this is that I have to notify every voter of the change, and I'll do that by a postcard to every, not to every household, but to every registered voter, all 7,400 of them. And in that, I can include information publicizing this election, which is a kind of a nice benefit to that. Another thing that ties into this as well, if we put all three of these in one location, we would then introduce the new voting machines at this election that you've just approved. So we'll have a vendor rep on site. If there's any problems, we can address it. Otherwise, you have 3 different people at 3 different locations using something for the first place. Okay, so again, how would this work? And it's interesting, I told somebody that I've now talked to 317 people about this. I actually started keeping track. And what has struck me the most is I anticipated the biggest question would be, how much farther am I gonna have to drive, all right? Because I live here and the school is here. And my wife first pointed this out to me, and I never really thought about this. But when I'm thinking about it, most people don't drive to the polls from their home. A lot of people, it's on their way to work, it's on a chore, it's coming back, it's part of their routine, it's not, I'm gonna come and go. So that's an interesting thing to look at that. But most of the people that I talked to, in fact, I just this evening spoke to a fellow on Oregon Road about this, and I said, what would you think about this? He said, well, his biggest concern isn't the extra miles you'd have to travel to get there, it's what would it physically be like, what would the voting be like? He was concerned about extra long lines and so forth. So it's very interesting that has been a common theme. People are concerned with the physical layout, not the distance. Again, the poll workers would park behind the court, behind the gym on the basketball court. It's a level surface. Any of the issue, election workers have mobility issues, it's a flat surface to walk in. You have 6 handicap spaces out in front. One of them, at least one, I think 2 of them are van accessible. There's roughly 80-something spaces out front. So, again, for the people walking in, it's a piece of cake. I don't anticipate any parking problems, even in the presidential election. Because if you think about it, we had 30+% of the people voted here early, and there were no lines at any voting location this past election. I have no reason to assume we won't have even a higher turnout in the presidential election. So the worst thing that could happen is we fill up those 80 spaces out front, some people might have to park in front of the Trotter School. But when you actually measure it, that's a shorter distance than you park in front of Woodward down below to get up to the inside of the Woodward School as well. So physically, it's not that big a deal. And again, inside, you're gonna have the same experience you have right now. We had no lines before. I don't see any reason to have any lines going on from there. I've talked to literally, like I said, that many, 317 people. I've talked to people when I put stickers on at the senior center. I've talked to people at the counter here. I've gone to Morrow's and I was accused of being a stalker at Dunkin' Donuts. And I wouldn't be here if I got any kind of a feedback that, this is a bad thing. And I've said this before to people, this is change. That's the issue we're dealing with, this nebulous, it's change, what's gonna happen. My voting location has changed. I used to vote at the fire station, and they moved over to Woodward. Whether we like it or not, change is coming here as well, because when, as our population keeps increasing, and the projections I just saw from the Secretary of State, they would estimate our population at over 10,000 right now. When Park Central comes into play, we're gonna have to go to a 4th precinct anyway. And that will, we don't decide how that really works out. Streets will have to change, and people will have to change locations based upon that. So I think this is an interesting, it's a way for the town to save the better part of $20,000 over the next 4 years, and those kind of numbers moving forward. It's not going to change anybody's experience. Some people are going to drive a little bit longer, but there's a lot of big benefits, and I don't underestimate that advantage to the schools. I've talked to people on the school committee about this, and I was really surprised how many people that I spoke to at the, people I didn't know at the senior center was giving out stickers up on stickers. And I ran this idea by them, and they said, hey, I'm a former school administrator, I'm a school teacher, I can't believe we've been in these schools anyway. So it's kind of an interesting mix that would be able to roll this out, this change, at a slow election, would be able to, through the notification, help increase the voter participation selection, We'd also have an opportunity to introduce the new machines to everybody at the same place and be able to troubleshoot that. We'd have a rep from the manufacturer on site for this as well. So it's a pretty significant thing. The state regulations require that we have to notify them of your vote a minimum of 60 days before the election. So that's pretty much it. I wasn't sure where this would end up when I first started asking people's questions, but so many people said to me, even downstairs, why wouldn't we want to do this? And these are people that voted Finn. I talked to election workers at Finn. So I think it's a good thing for the town, and I'd ask your support to vote to do this.
Questions for Mr. Hagerty? Mr. Shea?
Well, I think a lot of the questions I had coming in have been covered in information that you presented. It's very, very thorough. Thanks. Again, the big questions, concerns I had, not so much the town elections, which could probably be held in that back corner over there. But, the larger elections, the presidential elections, the elections for governor, where you have, the 70, 80% turnout and what sort of traffic impact or parking impacts that might have for, I assume the peak time was people getting out of work before or just after they get home, dinner time, and everybody converging on Trotter at that time. And would that, would parking be a limitation, for those elections?
I don't think so. First of all, Trotter would close for the presidential elections, so we'd have the full run of the place. They'd have a professional development day and have the teachers park out front. But not really, because you have 80-some-odd spots, excluding the handicap on the back, and then you have any overflow would be out to the Trotter. And again, the distance is less than what you have for folks parking at Woodward. We went down below. And again, once you get inside, it's straightforward. Another advantage, two other things interesting about the flow of this as well. And the chief and I talked about this logistics of some of this stuff. One of the nice things about, your board took a vote a couple of years ago to open the polls at 6:30 in the morning, which is a boon to the people that have to commute into Boston. And I know times when I've been down at Finn early in the morning, there were people waiting outside on a cold, sometimes rainy day, trying to wait to come on inside. Because they want to get in and out for that difficult commute. One big advantage of Trotter here, it's a covered walkway most of the way in there, so you're out of the rain and out of the elements. And there's kind of another neat thing. I queried all of the city and town clerks in Massachusetts through a listserv to see if any have gone down this path and what the results have been. And I emailed back and forth with probably 10 or 12 that had done this, and you could undo your decision. You could vote to do this now and change your mind and go back. It's entirely your call. I said, not one town has ever gone back from this. But it was very interesting. I went over to Westboro to talk to the Westboro town clerk over there. And she told me a very interesting thing I hadn't thought of, and I'd love to try to implement here. As I age out here, you start losing touch of the people that you knew from sports, from baseball, from soccer, from all the different things. And you start to see them when you go to the transfer station, different times of the day and so forth. But when you go to vote, oftentimes that you see the precincts and people you haven't seen in a long time. She said one of the interesting benefits of this was a sense of community that this brought to Westboro, because all of the people have to go into the one location, and they're seeing people they hadn't seen in years and all the rest of it. And they did a very clever thing. They got the Boy Scouts involved to help people when they come in. What street do you live on? You go to precinct 1, 2, or 3. And then they got the Rotary involved, and they had free coffee for people out there as well. So it was a really smart thing to get this kind of a community involvement out front. And I'd love to try to do something like that here as well. So no other town that has tried this has backed away from it. I've already made arrangements that if you vote for this, I'll be going down to Foxborough in September. They do this, and they talk about logistics and set this up. In fact, one of our poll workers has a sister who's a poll worker in Foxborough, and she put me onto that. So the clerk down there said he'd allow me to shadow him for the day and see how they set things up.
Ms. Bracchio?
Just a couple questions, thank you. Just logistics-wise, how will the voters enter? Will they enter through the main doors of the school and traverse down to the gym, or is there an entrance on the gym side that they would come in?
The only entrance they would travel through would be on the gym side.
Okay.
It's, gosh, I'd try to see how wide it is. It's probably 2/3 of from here to the wall, maybe 2/3 of that. It's a pretty wide, flat area.
I just wasn't sure if they were gonna go through
No.
the school,
No,
down
in
the
fact,
hallways, so.
that's a concern we have, in fact, from the other locations as well, that when people come out of the other schools, they would wander and
Yeah.
some, want to see the child in the class and so forth.
Okay.
This is a good way for us to block that as well, to prevent anyone from going to other schools. And I talked to Keith Lavoy, the principal, about that at length.
And if we did this and then you found that it may not have worked, or it's a very negative reaction from the public, how hard would it be to go back? I mean, is the opportunity there once we take this step, if for some strange reason it doesn't work out?
No, it's just a vote of the board and the consent of the schools to go back. But actually, I think the hard part, frankly, is not going to be the implementation of this. The hard part's going to come in 2020, when that other 60% of the population that don't vote all of a sudden show up at the Finn and the Woodward, the same folks that don't turn the census in and all the rest of it. So we're going to have to have pretty good education moving forward to do this. In fact, I talked to the treasurer downstairs today, Brian Ballantyne, about this. And if you go ahead with this, we will use mailings like on the census and water bills and tax bills and stuff, put inserts, multicolored inserts, just to get people's attention moving forward. And, in 2020, we would still have to have signs or banners at these other locations, because, people would continue at that point to go to locations. But that's where it's going to get interesting, when the people go to the other locations in a couple of years. Somebody said, interesting, a fellow last night said this to me, he said, the people that want to vote are going to vote. And the folks that don't want to vote are going to use this as, I didn't go vote because they made me, go, whatever, so.
And lastly, I'll just reiterate that there is a good number of people from working the polls that do come to the wrong precinct. That happens all the time. So just to reiterate that point, thank you.
All right, there may be yes, ma'am.
Desiree Asselbekian, 137 Woodland Road. This was actually the topic of why I was here today. I read this twice when I got the agenda because I was a little concerned, and I still am rather concerned. I'm not concerned about the consolidation to Trottier. I think it makes fiscal sense. I think that we all go to town meeting at Trottier. This is not like it's a different thing. My concern is with the timing of this and trying to implement it for November 7th. I do not think that gives the voters enough time, regardless of whether or not Mr. Haggerty is required to send out notifications. I think that we already are having a special election at an inconvenient time for voters in terms of when they're used to having an election. We do not vote on municipal elections in the fall like cities. We don't vote in odd numbered years for federal and state elections, so that's already strange as to why we'd be having something in November. And I think that the likelihood, regardless of whether somebody gets a notification in the mail for this particular election, of people showing up at Finn or showing up at Woodward is extremely high. I just do not believe that there is enough time to implement this properly. I would rather, as a voter, in terms of making sure that there is less disenfranchisement of the voting public, I would rather see the notification go out to folks when we are accustomed to the regular cycle of voting, which would be in May of 2018. Last year, we just implemented going from Monday to Tuesday in this May election. That was a change. Now we're hitting voters with a special election that is completely foreign to us in terms of timing. And in addition to that, we want to throw in this extra change of consolidating precincts. I just don't think it's a smart play for this particular special election. I'd rather have the notifications and the push and give voters enough time at town meeting to say, hey, listen, this building is where everybody needs to vote next month. I just think giving the voters a little bit more time to digest this idea is a much more prudent thing, and it again decimates the disenfranchisement of voters for this very important seat on the Board of Selectmen, November 7th. So I urge you, if you're so inclined to consolidate this, to make the vote so that you consolidate it in May 18. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hagerty, your response? So one of the concerns that I had in listening to Ms. Asselbekian, listening to what you presented, so what happens in that situation where someone shows up and, it's 5 minutes before the polls close and they're at Finn or they're at Woodward and they can't get to Trotter in time? Are you gonna have someone at that location that then, do you have the ability then to say, we had someone here, they were misdirected, if they get over to Finn and we'll keep the polls open for 50, how do you handle those individuals as well as what Ms. Asselbekian stated?
When 8 o'clock comes, the police officer goes to the back of the line and nobody else can vote. So 8 o'clock is the bewitching hour, no matter what. If there are people in the line that have not voted, like I say, the officer's instructed to take the position at the end of the line, and that's it. So if somebody were to go to Finn or Woodward and arrive there at 5 minutes of 8, from Woodward, they could probably make it over to Trotter in time. From Finn, it's unlikely they would be able to do that. So they would not be able to vote. That being said and done, we have I think you've noticed, somebody called me banner crazy. If you saw how big that banner I had hanging over the, convinced the fire department to have a training exercise to hang that banner up at DPW. We have lots of banners, we have lots of sandwich boards, and we will actually have a person stationed at each one of the schools throughout the day for this election in the fall. We will bang the drums on this a lot. Do I think inevitably somebody will forget this? That's entirely possible. It really is. I think it's more likely, I think it's much more likely for the presidential because of the difference of the kind of person who votes. The people that tend to vote in these local elections are people that are well attuned to town issues. I know myself when I've looked at voting lists over the years, who votes and why. There's a certain core group of people that come to town elections. They're the same people that go to town meeting. But there's a way for us to publicize this. And frankly, I think the fact that it's a change is going to draw a lot of attention to it as well.
Can someone vote absentee?
Absolutely.
All right, so.
Yes.
Would you be able to have individuals with absentee ballots at the other two schools at 5 minutes, so in that cannot happen?
No, because the cutoff for absentee voting applications is actually Friday at noon before the election. So that would stop there. We could not do that.
How widely can you publicize this, and in what other ways besides just the postcards?
Certainly on the blog, we're going to have banners at the DPW. We'll have banners on the things around here. We'll go to all the schools. We'll go out in the rec pack and the public pack going home. We'll get a lot of drill down through the senior center. We'll get a pretty good penetration of the voters here. I'm very confident of that. I wouldn't be doing this if I thought that we were going to just, trust me, the last thing I have in my mind is say, well, shame on you, you should have known, you should have shown up. That's not going to happen. People have lives, they forget it. I get it. But we will have signs all over the place to minimize that. But I can't guarantee that there won't be some people that won't do that. I think it'll be a very small number. And I'll tell you this, it's interesting. There's only a very small amount of people that come in at the very last minute for these things. It's not like you have a bunch of people rolling in at 5 minutes of 8. It just doesn't happen. After dinner, work, 6:30, 7 o'clock, sure. But it really tapers off dramatically just before 8 o'clock. And I know that I don't know if I was at Trotter at 8 o'clock, the presidential, but there's not a lot of people.
So I'm curious about, we'll drill down on that particular point, and maybe you have some experience with it as well. So how often has that police officer had to get to the back of the line, in your experience or yours, and say, that's it?
Not even during the presidential election, where there are lines out the door that, the police officer had to go. I think I've worked elections for 2-3 years now, and I did work the presidential as well, and I don't think we've ever come across a line out the door that's, you had to say, okay, the line stops here. It does slack off once 7:30 usually hits. You get just a few stragglers that trickle in. By that time, most people are eating dinner or they're with their families and their day is done. As Jim said, will there be somebody that will show up at one of these places? Probably, but will there be, if we wait till May, will there be somebody that also in May will probably show up at one of these places? You know, the opportunity's always gonna be there no matter when we decide to go ahead and do this. But again, the number, in my time doing the polls has been small. Usually once 7:30 hits, it's, you know, people start tallying up the books and, you know, at that point, because there is just stragglers coming in.
All right.
Well,
Mr.
and I
Shea?
can say one thing that hasn't been mentioned, a benefit to it is, you know, for everybody who runs for a town office and position and, you know, has people with signs out
Yeah.
on election day, there's now one facility that you need to worry about lining up friends, family
It's true.
members to go to, rather than trying to staff 3 separate facilities from dawn to dusk, so.
So I'd like to support it. It sounds like there's support. I'd like to support it. That is my concern as well about, I don't want to see any voter not be able to vote. And you know, if this is approved tonight, I can only encourage you to do everything within your office's means to widely publicize, starting now, through the town's website, through signage, through signage with the DPW, whatever needs to be done, postcards, et cetera, Twitter account, whatever you might do, so to ensure that we don't leave any voter disenfranchised. Am I sensing support?
Yes.
All right, is there a motion?
We vote to designate the P. Brent Trottier Middle School, 49 Parkerville Road, Southborough, Mass., as the polling location for all Southborough elections, beginning with the special town election on November 7th, 2017.
Second.
All right, and so you'll, yes, ma'am.
I presume Mr. Haggerty will have signs at Finn and Woodward so that if people show up, they know that they should proceed to Trottier.
As I said, we'll have signs, and I'll actually have a person physically there as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you very much.
Chairman's report. So I would like to mention, we had the Senior Division Little League Baseball team represented the town of Southborough in the regional tournament down in New Jersey. While they did not prevail there, they were, they won the state title here. And it was, it's an incredible accomplishment for those young baseball players, for the coaches that give so much time and effort into teaching them the wonderful game of baseball. And so I just wanted to commend that team. You know, look forward to seeing all those players going through hopefully our schools or others and continuing with the great game of baseball. So that is my only report, and it's a good one.
Well said, thank you.
All right. Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything to report tonight. Most of the past several weeks have been focused with the Public Safety Building Committee, trying to get the contract done with the OPM. And since that is taken care of, we're going to now move on to the contracting portion with the architect. So that's really where the focus has been the past couple of weeks.
All right. That moves us to the final 2 consent agenda items. Can you lead us through number 3, Mr. Purple, the extension of
Yes.
the current MTC and EDC appointments to 9/30/17?
Yes, so at the annual town meeting, as you recall, there were statutory committees set up through the, by town meeting for Technology Committee, as well as for Economic Development Commission. Those approvals have not been received back yet from the Attorney General's office. They're due back, I believe it's next week is the deadline for them to come back. However, you know, these committees continue to function, and so that they can continue to function while we wait for that, because even once you get approval back from the AG's office, we're still going to need to work to fill those committees Obviously, technology has changed a little bit as to how it's filled, 2 by this board, 2 by school committee, 1 by the library trustees. Economic development is a little bit more wide open, so that may be easier, but the thought is to, given your meeting schedule, you don't have another meeting scheduled until September 5th, that we extend their current appointments to September 30th, to give the board some time to address the issues of appointments, and then at that point, once you've made those appointments, you can dissolve the current committees.
And none of those individuals need to physically be re-sworn in, they're just being extended their current
No, my
term?
understanding is that they do not. So that their current appointment is simply being extended, and that notification will be provided to the clerk's office in the
Okay.
morning.
And then the approval of Chapter 90 project request?
Yes, and that is, Ms. Galligan has that in the packet. They're looking to, there are 3 things, there are 2 things in here. The allocation of $460,000 from Chapter 90 monies to the Main Street project. This is for the construction of the downtown area and for the easement compensation for the TIP project that's going to be beginning next spring. And also allocating funds to perform the improvements, Flag and Deerfoot Road intersection, as recommended in the safety study. So those are the 2 pieces that she has before you this evening.
And I would move that we approve consent and agenda items 3 and 4. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. All right, our final matter is a proposal to remove the utility pole from Main Street. Mr. Shea.
Yeah, so, obviously, so David, as you're, just before you start, I was away the last couple of weeks, and you had left a couple of voicemails with me, and I didn't have an opportunity to return them. I apologize. I do want to make one statement, though, and a request. One of the messages contained quite inappropriate language, foul language, and obscenities. It's a voicemail system that the 4 other people that live in my home also have access to. I don't think anybody at this table, on this board, any other board or committee member or town employee deserve to have messages containing that language. I would just respectfully request, I appreciate your passion for this, but would respectfully request that you not leave voicemails with foul language. Thank you. I look forward to your presentation, though.
And I would, has that message been received?
Yes.
Any comment to that?
Yes, I do, actually. I was simply passing on another message was given to me, and I was instructed to pass it on to you. I apologize, I guess, because I was, and I did what I was told to do, okay?
So someone told you to leave a message on his machine that with foul language?
Convey it to him, and he was on vacation.
So
No,
who
I was just quoting-
who asked you to?
I'm not identifying him. He's an anonymous person who was going to give
An
you
anonymous
$5,000
person, and you felt the need to do that?
He said to me, let's get this quite perfectly clear, I'm withdrawing my $5,000. You can say this to the selectmen. Please, I did it. Okay? I was following his instructions.
And you
Because at the
thought
last
that you
meeting-
thought
let me
that
finish,
was an
please.
appropriate thing to do?
Please. Because at the last meeting, the town manager said we needed someone said we need $5,000 to do a simple feasibility study. He said you don't have $5,000. So I went and raised 10. And when then you told me you can't even have an agenda item, didn't you, Mr. Chairman? Then I called this developer back, who will remain nameless. He said, you can tell the selectmen this, quote, okay, wasn't comfortable doing it. I'm sorry about it. They weren't my words.
They were your words.
Well, they were,
They
yes,
were the
but
word-
they came from somewhere else. I apologize.
You find it unacceptable?
Yes,
Because this
I
board
do.
does.
Yes, I
And
do.
Mr. Shea has not been the only recipient
I agree.
of that language
I'm just
and of that.
passing on the message. People are annoyed at what's happening here by denial.
Yes,
of
as is
rights
this,
to a-
as are members of this board annoyed.
Fine,
And
okay.
understand, Mr. Perry, I've been the recipient of it as well.
Okay, enough.
I served in a combat zone where people tried to kill me. Your verbal threats mean nothing to me, but they
not-
should never, ever
They're
occur.
not my verbal threats.
They
Stop
were.
exaggerating.
They am not exaggerating.
Someone else who was going to give you $5,000, and you blew it.
It was inappropriate and should never, ever occur.
Okay.
Are we clear?
Yes, we're absolutely clear.
You've got
Absolutely
15 minutes,
crystal
Mr.
clear.
Perry.
You just lost $5,000.
You've got 15 minutes, Mr. Perry.
Okay,
Before
thank
you
you.
begin, and this will not be part of your time, but I hope during the 15 minutes you will address a number of items that I know I have, questions that I have. If we have, the cost of this initiative is likely to be, I've seen $1 to $3+ million. I recall a very long night at advisory a number of months ago where we were haggling over $30,000. We couldn't even pay for a firefighter that our chief had requested. We couldn't afford some DPW equipment. So if there is a found $3+ million for this particular project, I hope that that's addressed where that has been found, and that is the use of that is by far the best use of our town's taxpayer funds. I've also not seen any vote from advisory. I haven't seen any vote from the Main Street Working Group. I haven't seen any vote from any other boards or committees. Normally, when we add an agenda item on to our agenda, there's a lot of that heavy lifting that's done in advance, and we know where those other boards or committees stand. We have none of that right now, especially from advisory as to whether or not we can even afford it.
Outside my 5 minutes?
I will state my points in your 15 minutes, Mr. Perry.
I'm sorry, you're asking questions outside my 15 minutes.
No, I'm not. I'm not. Your 15 minutes hasn't begun yet.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to respond to your questions outside my 15 minutes.
If we fund these pole relocations, are we going to fund every other resident's request to relocate poles from their front yards to their backyards? When I drove here, when I drive anywhere through town, this town is filled with poles. And I have seen many questions already about, what about my poles? So I would like to know how that is being addressed and how this board would address everyone else's poles that once theirs moved as well. What else could we do with this found $3+ million? Could our schools use those funds to cover full-day kindergarten? Could we use those funds for technology for our school kids, or hiring additional teachers to decrease class size? Could the senior center use updating? We couldn't even afford to replace these windows in town hall, but so I would like to know how all those things are being done. Apparently, there's been claims that hundreds of other towns have done this. I hope there's a list of those hundreds of towns. We should be able to rattle off 10, 20, 50 of them tonight if there are hundreds of towns that have done this, and why Southborough is so far behind the curve. And what happens if one resident or one business says no, or one of the pole owners say no? Then where are we on this? And also, I've had residents ask me, so if this were to happen, so that first winter storm occurs, poles go down, National Grid has to go out, but normally they go out onto a street where that street has been plowed. Now they're going to have to, in many respects, get down side yards or backyards, and which people don't plow those, get into backyards where heavy trucks could septic systems even cover that? And what happens when that first septic system is run over and there's liability to the town, to the resident, to the pole owner, National Grid? I don't know. So those are some of the questions that I hope you answer in your next 15 minutes. Mr. Perry, the floor is yours.
Well, do I get to answer that outside the 15 minutes or inside the 15 minutes?
Let's see what you can do.
Since you just had about 10.
Yes, I did.
Yes,
and I have. Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
Okay, I'll stay within my 15, and I won't even address your comments, except for saying this outside of my 15 minutes. It's very easy to be negative. Yes, you can criticize anything.
I think it would look lovely, and I've said that before.
Okay, but you're looking
I
for
need to be able to
problems.
pay for it.
All you
Yes.
list is problems, problems, problems.
It should be answered.
You're a leader. You're supposed to allocate funds where they're best spent.
The
where
15 minutes has begun. Thank
Okay,
you, Mr.
fine.
Perry.
Well, so you know, who sets priorities in this town? Not you. Town meeting. Town meeting deserves a vote. That is the issue here. Town meeting deserves a vote with facts, and they've never gotten that right, ever. Not even on undergrounding. It was never brought forward. It was dismissed. Now we're going to have a street built with brand new $8 million, and just as Marty Healy says, oh, Christ, it actually will look quite nice, except for one thing. We've got these ugly old poles up there, and we're going to look like blooming idiots when other people come through our town and see, my God, you just spent $8 million of state money, but you left these ugly things in the sky. Who was thinking? Was anyone thinking? Okay, that's outside my 15 minutes. Now I'll start my 15 minutes, okay? Right. Okay, because I was the selectman once, and I sat in your chair. My name is David Parry. I live at 22 Main Street. I'm not going to be intimidated by you. I was a selectman for 9 years. I'm a registered architect and city planner. I have a handout. Please hand them out, please. Everyone there's a copy here. I'm not going to have time to go through the facts, because the facts are written down. And yes, I have a reputation for speaking long, so what I've done is put them all down on 2 sides of a sheet of paper. Every single important fact is on this sheet of paper. And I've got an illustrative colored plan layout showing the alignment or route of the alternate route. Because, why am I here? Because there are many, many people in town who care, who do care about our street, and not just funneling traffic through our main street, but beautifying our street. Okay, I've been the person up front. I've taken the bows and arrows, but some people are here going to speak to you after I've had my 15 minutes, please. I prefer not to be interrupted. I'll just go through my 15 minutes. Where's my stopwatch? I count it, because you're going to keep me to it. Can you set my stopwatch? Do this? How do you win? Figure out my stopwatch. Because I need to know how much time I have, don't I? Anyway, so the problem is, you know, we have a project about to start in March. We don't want to interfere with the construction schedule. We want to keep it on schedule. We don't want to delay it. We want it to go ahead, because after years and years of effort, we finally came at a compromise, a good solution. It's halfway decent. It brings more traffic through Southborough, but it does not beautify Main Street. Why is that? Because, I got 14 minutes and 52 seconds, because, you know, the state doesn't give money for beautification. It's very simple. They give money for traffic. So every time, you know, the Main Street Working Group asks for things, you know, to make it better looking, they say, no, I'm sorry, we don't fund that sort of thing. Go and spend the money on your own. So that's why we've ended up with a project which is not beautification, but is simply traffic funneling through Southborough. Not appropriate, but anyway, I'm willing to go along with it because we've taken years of fighting and we've come to a reasonable compromise. But it's not as good as it could be because we've missed a very important element. We have not moved the poles off the street. Why not? Why not? Because we're fighting so hard about curbs and you know, radii and trucks and volumes of traffic and everything else except poles. Because, you know, we couldn't deal with it, because when we looked at undergrounding, oh my God, it's going to cost 11 million. We can't entertain that. Of course, it isn't 11 million if you cut the length down. It would be about 8 million. So this proposal is to have an off-street, is to remove the poles not through undergrounding, but providing an alternate route for the poles, a new route for new poles, which are not along Main Street, but off of Main Street, not in people's backyards, but along high driveways. Every pole will have a driveway next to it to maintain it. That applies. Woodward School will apply behind the pizza shop. There will be a new driveway next to every single pole. There are no poles in individual house lots, period. When it goes through Fay and St. Mark's, if it goes at all, there will be a driveway along there, along the poles. There already is driveway along much of the road. You know, Woodward, we're using Woodward School as an access way. It has a driveway. Okay, where am I now? Phone's gone. Come on, make my phone work, for God's sake. Why has it gone off? Why does this thing stay off? I don't know how. Figure it. Okay, right. Oh, Christ. All right, we're running out of time. All right, so anyway, so I'm going to show you, okay, why are we doing this? Beauty. Beauty. Are we embarrassed about beauty? You know, creating greater beauty. What are we don't live in ugly houses. We don't choose to live in an ugly town. We choose to live in a beautiful town and beautiful houses. This is what it's going to do to Main Street. Getting rid of ugly poles is going to get a more attractive Main Street. What does that do? It gives greater pride. It gives a lovely place for festivals, and it increases property values. And it also, by God, it actually brings new businesses downtown, because that is what other towns do. Now, where is this list of towns which have done this? I mean, there are dozens of them, but why are you asking me? Is it the burden all on me to generate every bit of data? You have a DPW. You know, you have VHB. Why can't they create a list of projects, you know, while other towns have done this? There are many, many, many. Go to New Hampshire, Vermont. You know, go to Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. Go to Miami. They've all done this. It's very, very common. Why? Because undergrounding is incredibly expensive. You can't afford it. So this is an alternate system which is way cheaper. It's nowhere near 11 million. We don't know what it's going to cost. So what's the proposal? We have to pay National Grid. That's the process. I'm on item 6 on the handout. They prepare a feasibility study. They determine the layout, and they prepare the cost. They give us the cost. Then we take that cost to town meeting, and town meeting votes this up or down. Now, timing is critical because, very simple reason, because under the present scheme, unfortunately, every single pole almost along the street has to get moved. It's really gigantic irony. Every utility pole along the street gets moved. 3 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, 2 inches. That's costing Mass Highway and National Grid $1 million. So we have a partner in National Grid who's the partner for us to feasibility study. If you figure out a new route, you're going to save $500,000. That is money which is literally thrown down the drain. It's a disgrace. It's not our money, it's public money, but it's our money eventually, isn't it? So we're costing National Grid and Mass Highway $1 million unnecessarily, moving poles a few inches. It's stupid. What we should be doing is spending money on a new route alignment where they can remove the poles entirely forever before this project ends, okay? Now I'm not going to take the action items, they're at the end. You can address it at the end. Now I'm going to go straight into my thing here. Why do I have Shiva the Destroyer, okay? It's really, how do I work this thing? Where's our genius over here? I press forward, do I? Okay. Shiva the Destroyer, because that's what we are, aren't we? We're fighting again, you know, just like Main Street. We're fighting each other over something so obvious. Okay. Thank you. You know, as removing poles, when isn't it blatantly obvious? There's Shiva, god of war, god of destruction. Right? Okay, there's the thing on the side there. Bingo. Okay, you know, Shiva marries the destruction. He's on the left. He marries the woman who's the god of creation. What's the product? It's Ganesh. It's stupid. You know, you may think this is stupid, but it's not stupid. Okay, because Ganesh is there, right? He's the young fellow in the middle who looks like an elephant. It's kind of ironic. How the heck do I go forward? There's no arrow anymore. Techie, Tom, there's no arrow. I've lost my arrow. Can you take this off my 15 minutes? It's gone, you know. I don't have any arrows. Okay, well, where have we got to? I'm not there yet. Okay. Can I go back? Okay. Why did it do that? Okay, well, here is Ganesh. You know, and what is he? He's an elephant, but he's the god of wisdom. He's the god of enlightenment. He's the god of thinking. He's the god of, you know, let's get over fighting. Let's get together. You know, and he's a blocker and he's an unblocker. He unblocks us and makes us think honestly and truly and openly, you know, about what we have to do. Okay. Now, here's the plan. You all have it. The yellow bit is where the poles get moved, and the green, I can't use a pointer, but up there, do you see the dotted green line goes down there, down there? Those are all the new poles. Up 85, across there, through St. Mark, up north of the Burnett Cemetery, underground there, because it's their fine driveway, through there, down the tennis courts, back over to Fay main entrance. Other than 1 or 2 lots on the right-hand end, the east end, all that property is public property, other than Fay and St. Mark's, which are actually gigantic institutions, aren't they? Well capable of paying for this on their own without our involvement at all. But we have to be the leaders. We have to take the lead, show it can be done. And by the way, it has to start there, west of the railroad, then it goes underground, under there, and then it travels north around like that, around Pizza. And then it goes over, you know, over School down there, and it goes under Main there, down to 16 Main, then it goes along Woodward Driveway. In other words, the trees have already been cut, by the way, not for this because they're dead. It goes up 85, and it goes across there. There's Town Hall right there. Because I'm sorry about the guys at home, I apologize, but, you know, there is no technology here, apparently, to show things on slides. And I'm not allowed to use a stick, of all things, you know, so, you know. So anyway, so it goes up there, and it's north of Burnett Cemetery, underground. Why? Because, you know, and the headmaster's not going to want to blooming great poles with wires in the sky along his beautiful driveway, is he? So that has to be undergrounded. Then it goes overground through the woods. Now, it also goes underground at 85 and at School Street, there. Why? Because VHB looked at this, and VHB says it makes no sense to do this unless you underground at 85 and School Street. Those are north-south connectors. So you've got 4 cross connectors, 1, 2, 3, 4, Then you've got this strip up there underground. Those are all, that's total underground, the rest is poles. Okay, now I'm going to do something rather unusual. Maybe you don't object, but it's the only way to sort of get the message across. There. What track is this? 1. Is it going to go? I'm not going to talk. Okay, why do I end here? Because this is where it actually starts, or ends, if you like. There is the railroad crossing, isn't it? And there is the pole. And why do we do that? Because we don't want to deal with the railroad for like 5 years getting an easement. So the wires would go to that pole, then down, then they go across Main to underground. There's the pole. That pole will remain. That's where we start. And then we end up, you see, we're down here, aren't we? We're there. We go up north around that loop, across down, and so forth. So that's the start point. Okay, that's why I showed that. Now let me stop this disk. So what am I going to do now? Now I'm going to show you a remarkable bit of technology created by a young man in Southborough, Zach Bemis, son of Peter Bemis, who devoted a huge amount of time, you know, he's a brilliant guy, doing Google Earth. And he's created this remarkable image. It's going to blow your mind, so I'm going to play other music and not say anything because it's just so bloody obvious when you look at the majesty of it and how obvious it all is. I've got 2 versions of it, one with trees and one without trees. Okay, now I have to go to track 8. Somehow. There. Is it going to go? Right, hold on a second. There. Track 8. Sorry about the primitive technology, but
I see about 3 minutes, just want to let you know.
okay, hey, Tom, how do I do it? Start it. Sorry, I don't know. I know, but you got to do. Okay, start it. Okay, with trees, right?
We're over 15 minutes, I believe. How much more is to go? How much more is to go?
There we are. Comes out at the entrance. Right there.
All right, thank you. Any closing comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to say the last page on number 9, it says the actions which need taking. And, you know, Brian, you spoke about these before. You know, someone has to be made responsible for this. Someone has to take charge. It can't be the selectmen because you're way overloaded. You have a million things to do. The committee, the logic committee, Brian, you suggested, was the Main Street Working Group. Why not expand this? What's that thing going beep beep? Oh, it's my alarm. Jesus. Very appropriate. I didn't know they did this. It's my first time on an alarm. Anyway, so, you know, it's already been discussed, but you never took a vote. You know, why not, I suggest, politely, respectfully, that you designate the Main Street Working Group as the group responsible, expand their scope to include pole removal. Let them figure out. There's done a ton of work here for them. There's no necessity whatsoever for National Grid to figure out the route. The route is figured out, and the easements have been figured out or given free. There's no need for easements, there's no negotiations, no need for appraisals. And then, you know, the next thing is instruct VHB to put in the conduit. You discussed that, you never took a vote on it. That's free. And then we need to install underground ducts pipes at the 4 crossings. That's obvious. Then we need to contact National Grid to proceed immediately, please, ASAP, because National Grid, you're going to save $1.5 million if you do start, potentially. So we're on your side. They're on our side. They're our friend. You know, good heavens. And we're going to give them $5,000 towards it. And I just ask right now if Karen Canal could please read a letter from the donor of the $5,000. My minutes are up.
Minutes are up, so if you'd like to submit that, that'd be
But
fine
he's
as
gonna
well.
read it. He asked it to be read, so I'm done.
All right, any questions or comments from the board?
Do we want to hear, oh, I'm sorry. Do we want to hear the letter from Ms. Canal?
Ma'am, how long is the letter? Or is it a
And is there a name
multi-page
attached to the
letter?
letter?
Who's it from?
I just was asked to read this letter.
Okay. You will need to go to a microphone, though. Sorry.
I mean, residents have to stand at the mic and give their address and their name.
Yep.
Is there a name on the
Hear
letter?
the letter?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just moments before the meeting asked to read this letter into the records.
So
The letter is from,
And just one moment, ma'am. Normally, we do not have a practice of reading letters into the record. Is this something that we want to alter tonight? It can be submitted, but normally we don't read. 'Cause we could have hundreds of residents that would like to have letters read into the record, so this board's practice has not been to read things into the record.
So, I guess I would just add, who's it from? How lengthy is the letter? What are we talking about?
it's 3 pages long. It's from Mr. Tony Kwan, a businessman that owns a sizable amount of property in Southborough.
So
Can we make it available on the town website in case citizens want to?
Yeah, because we had
read it?
allotted 15 minutes. It's well over that, so I'd like to,
You know, here's Tony
Can it be
Clark,
something
gonna
that could
offer
be
you
added to the-
$5,000, and you're denying his letter be read into the record? I mean, what is this?
So-
Is this some sort of circus? Are we supposed to sort of?
now, the circus is, we had allotted 15 minutes, and now we're well over
That
that.
was
We
supposed
don't
to
have
be-
a practice of reading letters into the record. And I'm not looking to start that tonight, because then we open up the floodgates. Let's read every letter into the record that comes into the town.
Okay, then I insist
what
on
we
just
do.
reading one paragraph to you then, right? Is that fair, Brian? Because
So-
he's going to offer you $5,000 for your feasibility study, but you say you don't have. He's giving you $5,000 with conditions.
So we have no idea if $5,000 is even enough.
Oh,
It may
well.
be 10,000. We have no idea.
Oh, now we're going to go that
$5,000
route
is
when
even
Karen
enough.
said it's $5,000 like 3 weeks ago. Right, Karen?
Mr. Purple, do we have any idea that $5,000 is the amount?
In the initial discussions that Ms. Galligan had with Verizon, the number of approximately $5,000 was floated. But now that the responsibility falls with National Grid, you know, each of the tenants on the poles can assess their own amount. I don't know what the total amount would be. We have an estimated amount of $5,000 from Verizon. We don't have a number from National Grid. We don't have a number from Charter.
Okay, so it's 5,000. I got the check right here, and I'm going to insist on reading one short paragraph. He says, on the matter of paying, he still lays out conditions. The $5,000 must be spent on evaluating this plan with 3 easements and no appraisals. That cuts 1.5 years out of this fictitious, long-winded schedule. It can be done in 2 months flat. Karen has that in her record for a conversation with Verizon. 1 to 2 months design. Everything else is easements and appraisals. So it's 2 months. That's what we're talking about. So it's fictitious. It can't be done. On the matter of paying for the cost of implementation, this is Tony Kwan writing, I will consider the following. Provided both Fay and St. Mark's School agree likewise, I will consider dedicating a substantial, or if not the entire portion of my payment in lieu of taxes, pilot, which I now provide the town purely as a voluntary agreement. I'm not compelled to do it at all. I'm going to dedicate all of that to pay off the long-term construction bond, which may be used by the town to fund the project. This could possibly relieve the taxpayers of the town a substantial amount and possibly all of the cost of implementation, and maybe a town meeting might not even be needed. That's in writing. Here it is.
All right, thank you. Any
your
questions,
check.
comments from members of the board?
So obviously, I would like to, you know, acknowledge the letter from Mr. Kwan.
So where's the
No,
$3 million? That's what I'm
so-
more interested in than 5,000. Where's the $3 million from the
So,
taxpayers
couple-
to fund this? And where is every other taxpayer's poll going to be moved to that once their poll moved at taxpayer expense?
And
I think it
again,
would
it's
look
town
great,
meeting.
but just because it looks great doesn't mean we can afford to do everything. And I've heard nothing from especially advisory, any other boards and committees that we even have these funds available. Mr. Shea.
So a couple points that I want to make that we've said it before, I think everybody is in agreement with the aesthetic value that relocating the poles off of Main Street brings. That's unquestioned. I don't see this as a $5,000 issue right now. I'm looking long-term. I don't want to have Mr. Kwan's $5,000 wasted if this truly is a multi-million-dollar effort to fully implement the project, and that's not anything that this board has the authority to move ahead with right now. Even if all 3 of us, and if Ms. Faniff were here, if she as well, were completely in favor of this and wanted to move forward with it, we still don't have the funds to completely implement this. And I think we need to get that. I mean, if this is something that the town wants, it should be an article at the next town meeting next April to vote yes or no. We've heard multi-million dollars from the utility companies, and the town has taken efforts to reach out to the private utility companies to get more information from those companies as to what the actual costs are going to be for the full design, for the full construction. So those efforts are underway. The town is spending time and resources with its staff to get those answers. We could be in favor of this tonight, but at the end of the day, we don't have the millions of dollars to fully implement it. And the issue of the easements, we've had feedback from the utility companies that the easements is approximately a 1-year process. They have a lot more experience with this than you do, respectfully. I have to think that they're closer to the truth on the actual time that it's going to take to fully develop the easements. They can't develop the easements until the design is done. 5,000 isn't gonna buy a fully developed design. We've heard the 5,000 is a deposit for them to start to develop estimates.
Not true.
So, well,
Not true, Brian. Okay,
that's what I, so please let me finish.
Right.
I'll talk, you talk.
Okay.
So I think I have to side with the utility companies on this. If they think it's, with their experience, it's closer to a 12-month process, I think, I have to think that it's closer to that than a 1 to 2 month, as you had stated. Again, and we can't do the easements until we do the design. You know, we don't know what is gonna have to change. You've done a nice layout for the poles, but nobody has put any effort at this point into what wires are going on the poles, what size wires, where transformers are going, how access to all that is gonna go, where guy wires have to go if there are additional easements due to guy wires. Are there additional poles required due to services from where the poles are to connect into homes? So there's just a lot of questions that only the utility companies are gonna be able to answer. The town has made the effort to reach out to those utility companies to find out the answers to these questions. This is a project that's gonna take a while. It's gonna cost millions of dollars that the town doesn't have right now. So, again, even if we're all in favor of it, the best that can come out of it is there's an article at the town meeting in April of 2018. Yes or no, does the town want to spend 2, 3, however many millions of dollars to relocate the poles?
Okay, now let me address you, because you make some very good points. I just want to go through them. You don't get to town meeting until you have the cost. You can't go to town meeting right now, can you? Because you don't know the cost. The way to get the cost.
We're efforting getting those
No,
costs.
no, you're not. Excuse me. National Grid requires $5,000 to start a feasibility study. That was stated on the public record on July the 19th. They want the $5,000 check. Karen can back this up, to start a feasibility study. The feasibility study determines the design and the cost. So here we are at this gate. To start, you have $5,000. You can't go to town meeting with nothing. You have to do the feasibility study for $5,000, or rather they do. They're going to get paid $5,000. So that's the reason why we need $5,000 to say, National Grid tomorrow should be called, said, get cracking, here's your $5,000. Easements. Why did they say a year and a half? Because they were told by Karen and VHB it would be a complicated problem, and you'd have to negotiate easements, and they might cost thousands of dollars, and you'll have arguments and rejections and everything else. And then you need appraisals. How much are they going to cost? It's nonsense, because all of the easements are exactly free. No appraisals whatsoever. There are no conflicts at all. The easements are free, therefore there's no appraisals. So that wipes out a year and a half. Town meeting, advisory committee, chairman, Mr. Chairman, can I address you? Can I address you? You just stated that you can't take a vote because you haven't heard from advisory. Okay, 2 months ago you said, oh, God, David, we can't take a vote because we haven't gone for the working group. Well, the working group voted 5-0 to go ahead, no brainer. Well, they're sort of being ignored. What the hell was the point of meeting with them? Then have you asked advisory? Here's a gentleman from advisory. Have you been asked, Sam?
Have you asked them?
It's my job to ask them.
You're the one running this initiative.
You're running the town. You're a selectman.
We're not running the town. We're representatives of the town.
Okay, now we're bailing out.
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Feel free, Mr. Stivers.
Sam Stivers, 7 Presidential Drive, Advisory Committee member. I'm not speaking officially for advisory, but I will report the facts that advisory has had a conversation about this, and the consensus was that advisory is willing to consider this, but advisory needs a specific proposal in front of them in terms of dollars and numbers, and in fact that was not presented. So advisory has an open mind, but is prepared to listen, but has not opined on an expenditure because no particular expenditure was proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Ms. Bracchio.
Expenditure, you see,
excuse
is
me, David.
non-existent because the $5,000 is in your hands.
Excuse me, Mr. Perry, I have some comments and some questions, please. I've heard a lot of the same questions as Mr. Kalenda. regarding, I'd like sidewalks in my neighborhood, I'd like the poles on my street removed as well. As for not knowing, without knowing the easements, David, to say that there's no cost to those easements, without knowing where those easements are going to be, we don't have a design yet. So if somebody says, well, you can put it here, but if the design comes back very different, those easements might change. That's why the utilities go after that with the design. Also, I'd like to just reiterate, the $5,000 was for one of the utilities to look at this, not all. And I know Mrs. Galligan has said that at any point, any of the utilities can say no, they don't want to go forward with this. So I just think that's another point that needs to be made, that there is the opportunity as this study goes forward for a utility, whether it be Comcast, whoever, Verizon, whomever, may also say it's not feasible in our eyes, and that would end it. But again, the feasibility study will eventually show that. I would also like to say that, David, you saying that it's a disgrace to cost National Grid $1 million on this project, we're asking our taxpayers to fund $1 to $3 million. So I know it's apples and oranges to some extent, because there is no way for this project to coincide with the Main Street project.
Disagree.
I disagree with you wholeheartedly. Major changes would delay the project. My understanding is that easements on the project need to be recorded by December. Otherwise, it's going to delay the Main Street project. And I don't think the citizens of this town, as representatives of the citizens of this town, I think we should be concerned about that. I also want to make a few points, actually. And I know some of it will come back in the study, but there's costs also involved in reconnecting the services to the homes from the poles once the poles are moved. Also, I'm not sure, David, that all of the poles that you have placed here are correct. My understanding is that anything over 100 to 180 feet would need a pole, and I think some of the spaces may be more than that. So I'm just questioning whether the placement is correct on that. There's also the possibly losing some trees in backyards of people's homes. Woodward currently has no poles running through the playground. This depicts poles. I don't know how the school will feel about that. Also, I know, I would just like to address some of the emails that have gone out that have said that the town employees are not working with Mr. Perry, and I would just like to say monies have been expended that were not in the budget to VHB for some of the engineering, and there have been countless, hundreds of hours on town employees, David, that have spent time working with you. Mr. Purple, Ms. Galligan, Mr. LaFlame, who works for the town, is here helping you tonight. So I want you to acknowledge that you are getting respect and you are getting help from the town, and there is no, it's almost disingenuous, David, for all the people that have been trying to help you. I don't know another person that's come forward with the project in this town that's gotten the attention that you have. And I commend you for your persistence, because that's part of the reason why. And I do commend you for that. But as I sit here, I have a lot of questions, more questions on this. And as a representative of the taxpayer, all of us, at the end of the day, David, we answer to them. And I have to wonder, and again, ultimately it falls to the taxpayer. They will decide at a town meeting on $1 to $3 million. I think this is something that the town should look for in the future, going forward, a capital project, whether we put something together. I think beautifying our downtown has many wonderful things that go along with it. We have a business owner here. I'm sure he'd like to see a little bit more foot traffic downtown. A little pocket park might help, you know, things to bring people downtown. I mean, our downtown is what is the charm of Southborough, and we understand that. It's just, I don't know if fiscally we can afford this now. And ultimately, again, the taxpayers will decide. Our job is to ask the tough questions of you, David. And I don't want you to think anybody's picking on you. We're just doing our job.
Okay, every one of your questions there was absolutely pertinent, absolutely relevant, and very good. And that is exactly what the feasibility study is supposed to give you the answers to. And that's what the $5,000 is for, to kick off the feasibility study to give us the answers. Otherwise, we're nowhere.
But that's a deposit for one of the
No,
utilities.
it's the cost of the feasibility study.
It's not.
Yes, well, excuse me, but you know,
It-
Karen,
and
you
again,
have to jump in here. It is
it's
the
for one
feasibility
utility.
study. And National Grid coordinates with the other
With
utilities.
Verizon, excuse me.
Come
It
on,
wasn't
Karen,
National Grid,
speak
it was-
up, please.
It was with Verizon, David. It was $5,000 deposit.
Yes, and
For
they
them to decide if
coordinate.
it's even feasible, but there are other utilities that use those poles as well
Yes.
that can come up with the
Exactly.
costs. And until we know those costs, I don't think it benefits the citizens until we know what it's gonna cost for the study. This $5,000 is great, and thank you to
Well,
Mr.
look,
Kwan.
listen,
But we
yeah.
need to get to that point. David, please.
Okay.
And we're asking the questions to try and get those solid numbers, and you need to realize that nobody's working against you. We're trying to work with you.
But you are working. You are working. Yes, you are. Because you're saying, oh my gosh, I got all these questions here, there, and everywhere, and they might cost X, Y, and Z. But the answer to that is to start the feasibility study.
How are we gonna fund it when we
But
don't
I've got
know
to give
the
you
amount?
$5,000.
It's
That
not
is the-
enough to,
Oh,
David,
well,
it's not enough to
Karen, then
fund
we'll ask DPW, please stand up and address that.
She does not need to. She has already stated to us that the $5,000, as reiterated by Selectman Bracchio, that the $5,000 is the deposit with one utility, Verizon. There are others that will charge as well.
So you don't have any additional funds whatever in your town kitty to add to the 5,000?
We don't know
Not
what
our
it is.
town kitty.
Okay, what is it then? What is
Trying
it?
to find that out, David.
Okay, so you're going to delay another month finding out what the cost is.
Well, if you could give us a number today, I would really like
I
to
am
hear it, but it's
going
not
on
5,000.
Karen's written memorandum which says it's $5,000. Right, she's nodding. $5,000.
For one,
No.
Or
They
Verizon.
coordinate with other utilities. You know, we're smoke and mirrors here. It's $5,000 to National Grid, and they do coordinate with other utilities. $5,000, period, for the feasibility study. Let's not have any more smoke and mirrors.
Okay.
You got the 5,000.
So we have.
If you
we
need
have-
10, ask me for 10.
We have now gone well over the allotted time, so we thank you for the presentation. We'll close that particular matter. Is there any additional? We have public comment coming up next, so is there any, so my questions remain. I don't know how, I would love to beautify the entire town. And I think this would be, this would help it beautify this particular part of town. It sounds incredibly expensive, and I don't know, how do I tell the taxpayers that this is the most important thing in this town to do with the limited amount of tax dollars that we have, when there are a variety? We'll have to invite all the schools in, we'll have to invite the seniors in that utilize the senior center, we'll have to invite, well, there's police and fire here, there's many uses that they could have, with upwards of $3+ million. I don't know that this is the very best use of the taxpayer dollar that we should be doing. So I can't ask the town's employees to continue, expending hours and hours and hours on this one particular project. If I knew from other boards and committees that there is a unanimous, not only can we pay for it, Board of Selectmen, but here's how, here are the other initiatives that are in town, and these are much less important than these polls, then, the taxpayers, can consider that. But that's where I stand. Mr. Shea?
No. Same.
Ms. Bracchio?
Same.
Okay.
I don't know if there's been said.
All right,
If there's
so,
others that wanna make comment.
Mr. Purple?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just, I've listened to the whole discussion tonight, I don't necessarily, appreciate the defamation of Ms. Galligan.
Nor do I.
And,
Nor is it deserved.
the reality is that, we have spent, a significant amount of time in trying to get this information. Obviously, we're not getting it fast enough, for some people. We have spent $2,600 to date, out of Ms. Galligan's budget that was not budgeted, if at some point we may need to go to advisory, at the end of the year, should that hold true. It's obviously still too early to tell, but there needs to be a clear direction from this board to me so that I understand what it is we should be doing. Should we continue to spend money on this effort? You know, there are other things that this board has set out. Public safety is one of them. The Main Street project is another one. We've got items from the town meeting. We've got conservation restriction on the golf course that the board has really not even taken up and entertained. We've had comments come back that we should be considering. We have the disposition of Fayville Hall. We have not even touched yet. You know, these are priorities the board has set out. So I just need some clear direction from the board, whether it's a vote or something, to understand what it is that you would like us to do on this. If this is something the board wants us to continue to pursue, I'm happy to do that. And, you know, and we will take whatever resources that we can, you know, to do that. But I think I need something, you know, from the board, a clear understanding as to what you're looking for on this issue.
So I think, Mr. Purple, there are way more questions than there are answers at this point. And I do not see that it's in the town employees' interest or the citizens of the town's interest, with so much that we're trying to do to continue to expend your staff's time, your time, and any monies on this at this point. Mr. Shea?
So I know that we have made efforts to reach out to the utility companies. Again, a lot of the questions that have been raised need to be addressed by those utility companies.
And
We
we'll,
have made those efforts.
we'll continue those, don't get me wrong, we'll continue those efforts. I'm more concerned about the expenditure of funds.
Yeah, and my recommendation is to continue to work towards setting up the meeting with the utility companies. Get as many answers as we possibly can to the questions that have been asked, that the utility companies can best answer. Do whatever we can to find out what the true cost of this proposal is, and report back on what that true cost is.
And interest.
Yeah. So, you know, and schedule, you know, again, these aren't town utilities, these are private utilities. They're gonna let us know what the cost is, they're gonna know what the schedule is. That's the reality of it. So I think we need to get answers to those, report back to the people, and if it makes sense to have it as a town meeting warrant article, we do that. I'll present the article at town meeting. I do not have the burning desire to be the one to give my Saturdays at the transfer station to advocate for it at this point, but ultimately, it's not our decision, yes or no, to implement this. We don't have the multi-million dollars we've been told that this is fully gonna take. We need to find out what the true cost of it is, what the true schedule is.
And what the town's priorities are, yes.
Yes, and put it to the people as to how they want to act on those priorities.
Ms. Brockie?
I agree. If there is any priority in this, it would be to just continue to ask the question, let's find out how much a feasibility study would even be. For me, that's the burning question. Everything else is important, but it may be $25,000, and then we have to come up with where that money's gonna come from. So for me, that's the burning question. And I agree, it's up to the taxpayers to decide, so
You know, and I think if we find out that it is, say, $25,000 for a feasibility study, or if it is just the $5,000.
Yep.
But we know that it's gonna lead to $100,000 to $200,000 for an in-depth design, and it's gonna lead to $2 million in construction. To try and, you know, do this piecemeal, and then have it shot down, you know, at the last vote, to try and go multiple, you know, attempts at town meetings, you know, we're gonna wind up losing time and wasting the feasibility study money and the design money. Let's find out, in my opinion, what's the true cost of the full project, vote it up or down.
I agree.
All right, Mr. Purple, is that clear?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you all. All right, public comment. Ma'am? Yes, please. Name, address, and and public comment is time for brief comments about things that the public may not be aware of. It can be something on the agenda, but we ask that they be brief to the point. Ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Karen Cannell, and I reside at 15 Main Street. And my comments are probably obvious to all, but I'd like to say them. So 3 points. The first one I'd like to say is that I would like to see the poles removed from everywhere in Southborough. I would like to see us all having sidewalks, safety, education. Our infrastructure is vital. And the reason that I'm here tonight in support of removing the poles is really in support mostly of the businesses in our little village that are going to be affected. We as a community came together and we voted to implement the Main Street reconstruction. We're all looking forward to that. It's gonna happen. It's a work in progress, and gratitude to our DPW director who has worked very hard at making that come to be. So thank you. But we as a community are asking our downtown village to live through a tremendous amount of disturbance to their businesses and their livelihoods, and they're not even necessarily benefiting from it. One of the reasons that I'd like to see us as a community find a way of getting rid of the poles in the village and then eventually in the entire town is because it will benefit the people who we're asking the most of. So that's one of the main reasons that I would like to see the poles removed, pushed away. I guess we can't put them underground. And one tidbit about that, we're talking a lot about money tonight, but we've already spent so much money. So not that I want us to spend more money, we may not even have more money to spend. But in future generations, we're moving poles to put them back where they are again. Even if it's not coming out of my taxpayer money, somebody's paying for it. Future generations will look and scratch their heads and think, you went to all the trouble of moving the poles, but you just put them back in a brand new, sidewalk or wherever they're going. So I could be wrong about that. DPW director can tell me if that's the case or not. But when I walk down Parkerville Road, it's funny because just before you get to a handicap incline, if somebody was in a wheelchair, they couldn't use the sidewalk to get down the incline because there's a telephone pole in the middle of the sidewalk. So that's what I'm envisioning for our downtown village. I could be wrong. More importantly, I wanted to say something, and it really doesn't have anything to do with this at all. I very rarely come to these meetings, and I feel so stressed out by this meeting. I really do. Being reminded of combat veterans, bullets flying, inappropriate language, talking to these are our neighbors. So it's very stressful. I really wish that we could impart more kindness. The only other thing that I would say directly to you, Chairperson, Mr. Kalender, I don't think it was intentional, but sometimes your tone, it feels like I feel bullied by it. And I have great respect for your service. And I just wanted to let you know that for somebody as an outsider coming in, I felt bullied by your comments. Other comments that were made here were out of line completely. But I don't like when people say an anonymous person, that's threatening. Like not knowing who your accuser is threatening, and then having a heightened tone is just, I think it was the heat of the moment, and I think that's why I very rarely come to these meetings, so thank you.
Those were wonderful comments, and thank you. And yeah, the anonymous person was someone we still don't know who it is, who apparently, yeah,
Someone says,
it was awful.
Somebody told me, or an anonymous person who wants to remain anonymous but knows about you.
Right, that's what we heard. That's what we heard tonight. I agree, ma'am. I agree. Thank you for your comments, sir.
Hello, my name's Ray Hokinson. I live at 10 Main Street, and I've been involved in this Main Street project since its beginning 10 years ago. And I think a lot of us who have been involved in this project have given up. And so I commend David for trying to resurrect some positive features that we wanted to see 10 years ago, and many of us just gave up on the project. In some part because it was all about an asphalt project. It was driven by an asphalt project and a road project. And in many ways, the town and the project was bending over backwards to accommodate trucks zipping down Main Street, technically illegally, and I think eventually somebody found out and would encourage them to get out of downtown. But it's just amazing the bending over that was done for certain aspects of road traffic, and the concept of the town center is missing. When I got involved in the Main Street, or not the Main Street, but the original town master plan and early engagements of the town center, I felt very empowered by it. This Main Street project has actually gotten me to the point where I used to come to these meetings a lot. I don't come to the meetings anymore, and I just wanted to commend David for trying to stick it out and trying to resurrect something, in part because I was at the meeting before the Selectmen in which the consultants gave their number for undergrounding. And there are a number that still keeps coming out time and time again of $8 and $12 million. I asked them at this microphone at that time, had you benchmarked your numbers with other towns that have done it? And their answer was no. So their $12 million or $8 million or whatever the number was an estimate. Just an estimate without a lot of hard facts. And we just keep running with that number as like, oh, we can't do it, it's $12 million. And so this was an attempt to try to get the same concept at a lesser price. And I think a lot of the people in this town who are engaged and wanted to be engaged in helping the project, adding some features, not adding expensive features, but small community features to it, have just sort of all gone, and many of us are just off it. And about 2 or 3 years ago, town meeting sort of forced the Main Street Advisory Committee on the town, because it wasn't there and it was going to keep going, and I will commend them immeasurably, because finally, after years and years and years of us talking and trying to get these small things, the Main Street Advisory Committee listened to us, and many of the features and the small things that we wanted to see done happened. Grass verges instead of asphalt from stone wall to stone wall, just softening things. And this is all part of the same thing. And I think Mr. Shea mentioned something briefly about a piecemeal, and I still think there's a piecemealness to this project, that we're just getting a piece, and we really sort of have missed an incredible opportunity. Many of us think we did. And we're now trying to tack on something to save it. And I think the most recent thing I heard is that we had always heard about benches and authentic lighting and stuff. And the Main Street Review Committee said, oh, it looks really stupid to put authentic lighting and then there's a telephone pole next to it. And it does, because we sort of missed that. And I just wanted to say that a lot of us are just frustrated, a lot of us have just given up, and this town, in many ways, should encourage public engagement instead of discouraging it. And I hope this isn't the end of it, and I hope we continue to make these efforts, and I fully back the Main Street Working Group, and I support the DPW for all the efforts that they've done. We've got a good road design, but we're kind of missing those small things, those opportunities to improve the town center. And it's not just, because we're here, because we see the immediate benefit of it, because we see it every day. And we're not like we're trying to steal from somebody else elsewhere in town, because I think the town as a whole would benefit from many of the things that we had wanted to see done. And I hope it's more than just asphalt. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir.
Hi, I'll just be a couple of minutes. Marty Healy, Upland Road, and I'm not here on behalf of the Main Street Working Group, but I'm the chair of the Main Street Working Group, so I know a little bit about the stuff that's being talked about tonight. First, to answer some questions that are just sort of sitting. Number one, it was mentioned that Mr. Perry hadn't come to the Main Street Working Group, or he doesn't have a recommendation or anything from the Main Street Working Group. Actually, he did come to the Main Street Working Group, or was directed to the Main Street Working Group. We had a meeting that specifically addressed his project, and Mr. Shea, who's a member of the group, was there. And the question that I put to him after our discussion and Mr. Perry's presentation is, what do the selectmen want from us? If you'd wanted a recommendation, you would have gotten one from the Main Street Working Group. Believe me. I'm not sure what it would have been. I suspect what it would have been. But we did take a vote on what to do with respect to the Main Street project. And number one, the clearest thing is we're not delaying the project, and there's no recommendation that would even touch upon a delay of the project. Mr. Hokinson's kind comments, I mean, the folks on the working group are pretty proud of the work that was done to take a very contentious issue and hopefully turn it into a positive for the town. I think it's true. I think that there are some traffic things that perhaps are not exactly what everyone would have wanted, but I think Main Street is going to look terrific, and it's going to be a 98% success, maybe pushing towards 99. But what we did discuss is, and we had talked during the course of our review generally about the whole question of undergrounding. And it did seem like a missed opportunity to at least consider the idea of what to do with the structures on Main Street. Now, the chair asked, why not other parts of town? We're not ripping up other parts of town. So it's a given that we're ripping up Main Street. And so the question was, given that we're ripping up the street, we're probably not going to do it again during my lifetime, are there things that can be done to Main Street in addition to what will be paid for by the state that will improve what Southborough looks like, will benefit folks who are putting up with an awful lot for the project for 2 or 3 years? And one of the things that was talked about is undergrounding. No one had even talked about the idea of moving the poles. And undergrounding, there was this number. I don't know where it came from, but it wasn't part of our purview to look at the possibility of undergrounding, so we didn't. When the issue came up, and Mr. Perry can be passionate, maybe even abrasive, maybe even more than that, but I honestly think that the Board of Selectmen, we put that aside. The messenger isn't the issue here. It's the message. And so we listened to the message, and what we voted on as part of the Main Street Working Group is to take any steps that could be done to preserve the issue. And that's why we voted to Karen can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that to consider putting in conduits, I think that's the right word, so that if at some point down the line the idea of moving the poles is feasible economically and otherwise, it can be done. My recommendation to the Board of Selectmen would be to do whatever you can to ensure we're ripping up Main Street. It's not going to be done again during our lifetimes. If there are things that can be done while Main Street is being ripped up that preserve the possibility for undergrounding, for moving the poles, who knows what utilities are going to look like in 10 or 15 years. We may not even need poles. So in other words, to look at what can be done as part of the Main Street project without spending $1 million or $3 million, but what can be done to preserve the issue so that if 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, or 6 months from now, it can be addressed, we haven't missed the opportunity. So the Main Street Working Group commended Mr. Perry. I think he should be commended. I think, David, your tone could change sometimes, but the same can be said for a lot of people. But I wouldn't stop looking at the issue. We're tearing up Main Street. It's going to look great afterwards, but while it's being torn up, are there things we can do to preserve possibilities down the line? If there are, we should do them.
Thank you, sir. Sir.
Great comments. Oh, sorry, Christo Baltis. I live on Middle Road, but I think I live on Main Street more than I live on Middle Road. I own Southborough House of Pizza with my family, the Baltis family. And great comments by everybody. Karen, Mr. Hawkinson, yeah. Terrific comments. It is stressful coming to these meetings, I'll agree. I used to come when Mr. Perry was selectman, and he and my dad used to butt heads, as you did tonight. So it was great. I guess I'll give a different perspective from a businessman's point of view. We are going to endure a lot with this Main Street reconstruction program. Business will suffer. I do not want this pole and wire issue to come up 5 years down the road. I'm not going to go through 2 or 3 years of construction just to turn around and have to do it again with poles. I will be not in support of it at that time. This time, when we are ripping up the road, yes, I'd be glad to. And another issue I'd like to talk about a little bit, and it really doesn't have much, everything is kind of connected in this town. It's a small town. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but Main Street is dying. Downtown Southborough, and it's funny that Mr. Hawkinson mentioned it as town center. Downtown is not town center anymore, unfortunately. It just is not. Town center is downtown. That's where everybody goes. I remember a time when our town elders, our selectmen, everyone used to congregate downtown, used to go to the spa, which is now Morrow's Cafe, and deliberate the issues of the time. You couldn't find a parking spot in downtown Southborough. Go downtown now. Go downtown at lunchtime. Go downtown at night. You can't see 10 or 15 cars down there. Nobody goes downtown anymore. We have a larger issue here, I believe, than the poles and the wiring. We need a whole reassessment and reevaluation of the whole downtown area. We need to open it up to more business, as Lisa said. That's very important. People might think that businesses are afraid of competition, but we're not. Competition it brings more business. If nothing is done, and you know this feasibility study is kind of step one to all of this. It has to start somewhere. Doing this, I think, is very important, but it can't stop there. And I think you're right. This is the time to consider doing something about these poles and these wires and doing something about everything. Like I said, I am not going to want to revisit this in 5 years after I've gone through minimum of 2 years of construction, I'm thinking. And I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we won't be there after 2 years. Who knows? I'm hoping we will be. But we take great pride, I think. Everybody in town takes great pride of their little town and their little quaint downtown area. And we want to bring it up. Make it look nice. Make it some place that not only townspeople want to go to, but people from other towns want to come to. We have a lot of work to do. This is I think a minor issue, but we have to do somewhere. We have to start somewhere. Yeah, that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Hi, Steve Phillips, 26 Main Street. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, and I'll be very brief. I think thinking about this project today, it kind of occurred to me, you know, we've been talking about this project in the abstract for so many years now that it's difficult to imagine that it's actually going to start happening pretty soon. So all of the talk is and debate and discussions, really, we're going to have our own reality on the ground that we're going to get a chance to see. And in the end, the outcome of this project is going to be visible for everybody to see, for better or for worse. Although I've certainly had a lot of objections and concerns about this project over the years, I've been although I appreciate the discussion bringing more business to town, I actually was glad to see that a couple of fortuitous developments, such as Ted's deciding to move down to Route 9 and the relocation of the fire and the public safety complex, it looks like I'm willing to imagine the possibility that maybe this will be a good project in the end. But I think for better or for worse, it will be there for all of us to see. The only thing I ask or hope to see is a level of mutual respect and comity in all of the parties to this thing. I'll stick up for David a little bit here. I know that he's a very passionate person and can be very abrasive. I think as town officials and as citizens of this town, we deal with people all the time who might be abrasive and say things that we are concerned about, or you know, that we have to react to. But I think that we can't let that distract us from the important issues, from the actual real issues that are here. I'm agnostic on this pole issue. I'd like to understand how much it would cost to actually get a real investigation of it. You know, if $5,000 isn't the number, what is the number? You know, and I agree with Ms. Braccio that's a key question to ask. You know, what is the next step that would bring that here? But I think that all of that, in a sense, is subsidiary to that we have to get along here. We've been fighting over this project for 15 years now. You know, the original undergrounding when undergrounding was first proposed, I was a little concerned at the time that it felt like the Main Street residents were getting demonized, like we were asking for something special. And in the discussion of the polls, I hear some echoes of that same, you know, I don't want to feel that we're greedy somehow because we want our Main Street to look good. And I'm not taking a stand on whether or not this particular moving the poles is feasible or works or whatever, but we are all here as people who care about our town very passionately. We've had a lot of fights over the years. You know, now it's coming forward. Let's just try to look for every opportunity to make this project work and to be as good an outcome as it can. You know, I know I've certainly had my disagreements with Ms. Galligan over the years, but I have to say I respect very much the persistence and dedication and the hard work that's gone into this, and the Board of Selectmen and everybody who's been involved with this project over pushing 2 decades now. So thank you for your time, and I certainly appreciate your putting this item on your agenda tonight and having this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any final comments? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Justin Kelsey, 16 Atwood, and I'm actually one of the owners of 9 Main Street, the collaborative outpost, the old post office. David's been over a few times to talk about this project, and I'm new, so I've only lived in town for a little more than a year. I don't know all this history that everyone's talking about. For me, in the building that we have, the poles don't actually go in front of my building. But looking at downtown, I think I can agree with everybody that it would be nice if they weren't there for the walkability of downtown and how it would look. And I can't speak to all the costs, but I wanted to say that I do appreciate David's passion on this. And I also appreciate that at the end of that conversation, despite reservations that you clearly have about the feasibility overall of the cost of this project, keeping the door open to finding out how much it would cost for the feasibility studies, how much it would cost for the next step. And David has done legwork to see if he can get private people to pay for that step. And if it doesn't cost us anything to get the feasibility study, I think we should do that and have that information. Information is never a bad thing. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time. Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to town.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so motion to adjourn? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I'll keep this.